Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now, let's begin. The courthouse steps were slick with February rain when Jake Tanner first held his daughter Emma as a divorced man. She was 3 then, small enough that her head fit perfectly under his chin, her tiny fingers gripping his jacket like she'd never let go. He remembered thinking that no legal document, no judge's signature, could sever what mattered most. 2 years later, standing in his kitchen with cream-colored cardstock in his hands, he understood how wrong he'd been. The wedding invitation was unnecessarily ornate. Embossed gold lettering announced the union of Allison Baxter and Richard Foley, set for the first Saturday in June at the Riverside Country Club. Jake ran his thumb over his ex-wife's name, feeling the raised letters beneath his skin. 5 years of marriage, 2 years of bitter divorce proceedings, and now this. The invitation specified, adults-only reception in elegant script at the bottom, but someone had scrawled in pen, Emma can attend ceremony only. R.F. insists. Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her kindergarten uniform, blonde hair escaping from her ponytail. At 5 years old, she had Allison's blue eyes but Jake's stubborn chin, a combination that made his chest ache every time he looked at her. "Daddy, is that from Mommy?" Jake set the invitation on the counter. "Yeah, sweetheart, it's about her wedding. The one where she marries Richard." Emma's voice went small. She'd been calling him Richard since the beginning, never Uncle Richard or anything warmer. Jake had never pushed it, watching his daughter's instincts prove sharper than any adult's. "I don't like Richard." "Why not?" Jake kept his tone casual, crouching to her level. He'd asked before, but Emma always grew quiet, shaking her head. This time she bit her lip. "He says mean things when Mommy's not listening. He says I'm loud and annoying." Her eyes filled with tears. "He said I wasn't supposed to exist." Jake pulled her into his arms, fury building beneath his skin like magma, but he'd learned patience in the 2 years since the divorce. Allison had weaponized the courts against him, painting him as unstable, unreliable. Her attorney, Warren McDaniel, had been ruthless. Jake had lost the house, most of their savings, and gotten reduced custody every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. The judge, swayed by Allison's tearful testimony about his angry outbursts and obsessive behavior, had called Jake's request for equal custody unrealistic given the circumstances. Those circumstances were manufactured. Jake taught American history at Lincoln High School, where his students consistently scored in the top percentile and parents requested him by name. He'd never raised his voice in anger, never shown the volatility Allison described under oath. But her narrative had been careful, constructed with McDaniel's precision. A controlling husband who tracked her movements, questioned her friends, made her feel trapped. None of it true. All of it believed. "Hey," Jake said, pulling back to look at Emma. "How about we make spaghetti tonight? The kind with the meatballs you like to roll?" Emma's smile came back, small but genuine. "Can we make them really big? Enormous?" He stood, lifting her onto his hip, though she was getting heavy. "Big as baseballs." While Emma washed her hands, Jake looked at the invitation again. He'd known this was coming. Richard Foley had entered Allison's life 8 months after their divorce was finalized, though Jake suspected the timeline was more generous than accurate. Richard owned 3 luxury car dealerships across the state, drove a different vehicle every week, and wore suits that cost more than Jake's monthly salary. He was 42 to Allison's 34, handsome in that practiced way of men who spent significant time and money on their appearance. Jake had done his research. Not the obsessive stalking Allison had accused him of, but the methodical investigation he'd teach his students to conduct when examining historical sources. Richard Foley's business success was legitimate. His divorce from his first wife, Brandy Frederick, 10 years ago, apparently amicable. No criminal record, no red flags. On paper, Richard was exactly what Allison wanted. Wealthy, successful, stable. But paper lied. Jake had learned that lesson well. He'd started paying attention 4 months ago, when Emma came home with a bruise on her arm. "I fell," she'd said, but her eyes slid away from his. Jake had documented it, taken photos, called his attorney Lester darling. Without more evidence, Lester had said carefully, accusations will look like harassment, especially given your history. His history, the narrative Allison created. So, Jake had become careful. He'd purchased a small recorder, the kind that looked like a keychain, and tucked it into Emma's backpack when she stayed at Allison's house. Not in her bedroom, he wasn't a monster, but in common areas where conversations happened. He told himself it was wrong even as he pressed the purchase button. Then he'd listened to the first recording and felt his soul go cold. She's so fucking needy. Allison's voice sharp with whine. Always wanting stories, wanting attention. I can't wait until she's older and less exhausting. You should send her to that boarding school in Connecticut. Richard's voice, smooth. My cousin's kids go there. Year-round program. Jake would never agree. Jake doesn't have to know until it's done. You have primary custody, your attorney said. The recording had cut off there. Emma's backpack apparently moved. But Jake had heard enough. He collected 6 more recordings over the following months. Each one carved pieces from his heart. Richard's casual cruelty. Allison's agreement. Their plans to phase him out entirely after the wedding. Using Richard's money to fund legal battles Jake couldn't afford to fight. The meatballs are ready. Emma called from the kitchen, and Jake pushed the thoughts away. Tonight was about being her father. Tomorrow he'd continue his work. Because Jake Tanner had learned patience. He'd learned to document, to wait, to plan. And he'd learned that sometimes justice required more than courtroom appeals and measured responses. Sometimes it required showing people exactly who they were in front of everyone they wanted to impress. The wedding was 12 weeks away. Jake marked it on his calendar with a black X and began to prepare. Morris Massey had been teaching alongside Jake for 7 years, and he noticed the change immediately. "You're plotting something?" Morris said one afternoon in the teacher's lounge, watching Jake sort through printed screenshots on his laptop. "I know that look. That's your students are about to learn about the Watergate investigation in excruciating detail look." Jake glanced up. Morris was 56, taught English literature, and had been through 2 divorces himself. If anyone would understand, it was him. Allison's getting married. Ah. Morris sat down, bringing his coffee with him. The invitation arrived. Last week. Jake closed his laptop. Emma's invited to the ceremony, but not the reception. Richard's rules. Morris's jaw tightened. That's cruel. It's strategic. Jake kept his voice level. They're establishing the pattern now. After the wedding, they'll argue that Emma needs stability, that my weekends disrupt her routine. They'll request I only get supervised visits. Then holidays only. Then nothing. Morris finished. He'd fought similar battles with his second ex-wife. Lost most of them. What are you going to do? Jake considered the question. Morris was trustworthy, but involving others meant risk. Still, he needed a witness. Someone who could testify, if needed, that Jake's evidence was gathered properly. "I'm going to attend the wedding. Even though you're not invited, I'm the father of the bride's daughter. That makes me family." Jake smiled without humor. Besides, Allison made a mistake. The invitation is addressed to the Tanner family. Plural. She probably didn't even read it before Warren McDaniel's office sent them out. Morris leaned back, studying him. "Jake, be careful. Whatever you're planning." "I'm not planning anything illegal." It was mostly true. The recordings existed in a gray area. Colorado was a one-party consent state, and Emma had been present for all of them. Whether a 5-year-old constituted a consenting party was debatable, but Jake had consulted with 3 attorneys, none of whom were Lester. The consensus was murky enough to work with. "I'm just going to share some home videos." Home videos that will show everyone exactly who Allison and Richard really are. Jake's voice hardened. "They've spent 2 years making me look like a monster. I'm going to spend 300 guests worth of time showing them the truth." Morris was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "What do you need?" That evening, Jake sat in his home office and reviewed his materials. He'd organized them chronologically, building a narrative the way he'd teach his students to construct a historical argument. Evidence. Context. Conclusion. Recording 1. Allison and Richard discussing Emma as an inconvenience, mocking her fear of the dark, laughing about how she cried when they left her alone in her room. Date. February 14th. Valentine's Day. Emma had mentioned being scared that night. Recording 2. Richard, on the phone with his attorney, discussing how to minimize the father's involvement post-marriage. The attorney, who wasn't Warren McDaniel, had suggested documenting any instance where Jake was late for pickup, forgot to pack something, made any mistake. Build a pattern, The attorney said. Even good fathers slip up. We use those slip-ups. Recording 3. Allison, talking to her friend, Cecilia Sampson, admitting she'd exaggerated claims about Jake's behavior during the divorce. I mean, he was distant sometimes, but Warren said I needed something concrete for the judge. So I gave her concrete. Jake had nearly destroyed his desk when he'd heard that one. Recording 4. Richard losing his temper with Emma when she'd spilled juice. The sound of his hand hitting the table made Jake's blood pressure spike, even on replay. Emma's crying. Richard's voice, low and vicious. Stop being such a fucking baby. You're pathetic. Recording 5. Allison complaining about the cost of Emma's piano lessons, which Jake paid for. I don't know why we have to keep pretending he's a good father. After the wedding, we should just cut him loose. It's not like Emma will miss him once we're in the Caymans half the year. The Caymans. That had been news. Jake had researched immediately and found that Richard had purchased a vacation property there 8 months ago. The kind of property you could claim as a primary residence if you wanted to establish custody in a different jurisdiction. Recording 6. A conversation between Richard and an unknown man about his previous marriage. Brandy was smarter than Allison, Richard had said. She knew when to fold. This one thinks she's got leverage because of the kid. You keeping the kid in the picture? For now. Once we're married and I've got legal standing, we'll phase the father out and ship her off to school. Then, Allison and I can actually enjoy our lives. Jake had played that recording 20 times, memorizing every word. Emma wasn't his daughter to Richard. She was an obstacle. A problem to be solved. The video evidence was more limited but equally damning. Jake had hired Sam Duran, a private investigator who looked like someone's grandfather and had a spotless reputation. Sam had obtained footage of Richard screaming at a valet, shoving a restaurant hostess, berating a young employee at one of his dealerships until the kid was visibly shaking. Not illegal, but revealing. Then, there was the footage Jake didn't hire anyone to get. His own doorbell camera had captured Allison dropping Emma off one Sunday evening, 2 hours late. Emma had been crying in the back seat. When Jake had asked what was wrong, Allison had snapped. She's fine. Stop being so dramatic. She's manipulating you because she knows you'll fall for it. Emma's voice, small and broken. Mommy said I couldn't have dinner until I apologized for being bad. What did you do that was bad? Jake had asked. I asked if Daddy could come to Mommy's wedding. The video showed Allison's face clearly, showed her rolling her eyes, showed her saying, loud enough for the camera to catch, your father isn't invited because he's not family anymore. You need to understand that. Jake had filed that moment away in the same mental folder where he kept every other wound Allison had inflicted. The collection was extensive. His phone rang. Lester Darling's name appeared on screen. Jake, I got your message about the wedding, Lester said without preamble. I don't think attending is a good idea. Why not? I'm on the invitation. You know what I mean. If you're planning to cause a scene, I'm planning to exercise my rights as Emma's father. Jake kept his tone measured. Unless there's a legal reason I can't attend a wedding I was invited to. Lester sighed. No, there's no legal prohibition. But Jake, listen to me carefully. Whatever evidence you think you have, whatever you're planning to reveal, it needs to go through proper channels. The court, not a wedding reception. They banned Emma from the reception, Jake said quietly. Her own mother's wedding reception, because Richard thinks she's an inconvenience. The line was silent for a long moment. Lester had 2 daughters of his own. That's cruel, he finally said. But public humiliation isn't the answer. It'll make you look vindictive. I already look vindictive. Allison made sure of that. Jake rubbed his temples. I appreciate the advice, Lester. I really do. But I've been doing this the right way for 2 years. Filing motions, requesting mediation, being the bigger person. And I've watched my daughter suffer for it. Jake, I'll be in touch after the wedding. He ended the call before Lester could argue further. Morris had agreed to help with the technical aspects. He knew a guy, Doug Bryan, who ran audio-visual equipment for conferences and events. Doug asked no questions when Morris explained they needed a way to connect a phone to a venue's projector system remotely. Bluetooth adapter, Doug had said, handing over a small device. Syncs with your phone, overrides their controls if you're within range. Technically, it's for accessibility purposes, but he'd shrugged. Jake tested it 3 times in his classroom, making sure he could control the projection seamlessly. The last thing he needed was technical failure when the moment came. Emma's therapy sessions had increased to twice a week. Dr. Rita Wise was patient, kind, and increasingly concerned. Emma's anxiety is manifesting in new ways, Dr. Wise had told Jake during their last parent consultation. She's afraid of disappointing people, afraid of being bad. That kind of fear doesn't develop in a vacuum. Her mother tells her she's inconvenient, Jake had said flatly. Her soon-to-be stepfather calls her pathetic. Dr. Wise had looked at him sharply. Do you have evidence of this? Yes. Have you presented it to the court? I'm working on it. Now, sitting in his office with 12 weeks turned to 4. Jake knew he was past the point of traditional channels. The courts had failed Emma. His attorneys had failed Emma. The system that was supposed to protect children had looked at Allison's tears and designer suits and believed every word, while dismissing Jake as a bitter ex-husband grasping for control. So Jake would bypass the system entirely. He'd take his case directly to the 300 people Allison most wanted to impress: her family, Richard's business associates, their wealthy friends. He'd show them the recordings, the videos, the evidence of who these people really were behind closed doors. And he'd let social consequences do what legal ones couldn't. Emma wandered into his office, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Daddy, I can't sleep. Jake immediately closed his laptop and held out his arms. She climbed into his lap, warm and small and trusting. Bad dream? No. Just thinking about Mommy's wedding. She picked at her rabbit's ear. Do I have to go? Everything in Jake wanted to say no. Wanted to keep her safe from whatever public spectacle was coming. But he also knew Emma needed to see that her father would fight for her, that he wouldn't let her be erased. How about this? He said carefully. We'll go to the ceremony. We'll sit in the back, and if you want to leave at any point at all, we leave. Deal? Emma considered this. Will Richard be mean to me? Not if I'm there. That was a promise. And sweetheart, no matter what happens, I need you to know something. You are not a mistake. You are not an inconvenience. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. She hugged him tightly. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Em. More than anything. After he tucked her back into bed, Jake returned to his office and made the final edits to his presentation. 90 seconds of carefully compiled evidence. Enough to destroy carefully constructed lies. Enough to show 300 people exactly who Allison Baxter and Richard Foley really were. He thought about Lester's warning, Morris's concern, even Dr. Wise's careful skepticism about his methods. They weren't wrong to worry. What Jake was planning existed in a moral gray area. Legal enough not to land him in jail. Questionable enough to potentially backfire. But he'd spent 2 years watching Emma's light dim. 2 years being called a liar, an exaggerator, a bitter ex-husband. 2 years of Allison rewriting their history and the courts believing her version. Sometimes the right thing and the legal thing weren't the same. Jake had taught that lesson when covering civil disobedience, whistleblowers, every person throughout history who decided that unjust systems required extraordinary action. Now he'd live it. The wedding was 4 weeks away. Jake marked another X on his calendar and prepared for war. The Riverside Country Club sprawled across 15 acres of manicured grounds. The kind of place where memberships were inherited, and the waiting list was longer than Emma's lifetime. Jake had driven past it dozens of times, but never imagined he'd walk through its marble-columned entrance. Yet, here he was on the first Saturday in June, wearing his best suit with Emma's hand in his, both of them hovering at the edge of the valet station. Remember what we talked about? Jake said quietly, crouching to Emma's level. She wore a pale yellow dress that Allison had sent over, probably chosen by her wedding coordinator to match some color scheme. If you want to leave, I tell you, and we go. Emma nodded, but her blue eyes were wide with anxiety. Will Mommy be happy to see me? Jake's heart cracked. Of course she will, sweetheart. The lie tasted bitter, but what else could he say? The truth that Allison had tried to exclude Emma entirely, that only his insistence and the vague wording of the invitation had gotten them this far would destroy what little relationship Emma still had with her mother. They entered through the main doors, following signs toward the Riverside Ballroom. The ceremony was being held in a glass-enclosed garden room with a view of the club's private lake. Jake could see it through the windows. 300 white chairs arranged in neat rows, a flower-draped arch at the altar, and enough roses to stock a florist for a month. "Mr. Tanner?" A young woman with a clipboard appeared, her smile professional but cool. "I'm Stacy Woods, the wedding coordinator. I wasn't aware you'd be attending." "Family invitation," Jake said pleasantly, pulling out the cream cardstock from his jacket pocket. "It's addressed to the Tanner family, which includes Emma and myself." Stacy's smile tightened. "I see. Well, the ceremony is about to begin. I'll need to find you seats. We're happy in the back." Jake had already spotted the last row, near the exit. Perfect positioning. That's not Stacy caught herself. Of course. Right this way. The ballroom was already filling with guests. Jake recognized some of them. Allison's parents, Gary and Jeanette Winter, holding court near the front. Her brother Donnie White and his wife Carrie Kennedy. Richard's business associates, men in expensive suits with trophy wives. Allison's college friends, women who'd testified during the divorce about Jake's supposed controlling behavior. Warren McDaniel, the attorney, was seated 3 rows back, his presence a reminder that legal threats were always close. Emma's hand squeezed his as they walked the long aisle to the back row. Jake could feel eyes following them, hear the whispers starting. He kept his expression neutral, pleasant even, just a father bringing his daughter to her mother's wedding. Nothing to see here. They'd barely settled when music swelled from hidden speakers. The processional was beginning. Richard appeared first, walking down the aisle with practiced confidence. He wore a charcoal gray tuxedo that probably cost more than Jake's car, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile wide and winning. He looked like a man who'd won everything he'd ever wanted. Jake's hand moved to his phone in his pocket. The presentation was loaded. The Bluetooth adapter Doug had provided was in his other pocket, ready to sync. He just needed the right moment. Richard reached the altar and turned, waiting. The bridesmaids came next in flowing champagne-colored gowns. Allison's friends, all of them women who'd cut Jake from their lives the moment Allison reframed their history. They smiled at Richard, took their positions. Then, the wedding march began. Allison appeared at the back of the room on her father Gary's arm, and Jake had to admit she looked stunning. Her dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant twist, her makeup flawless. She looked like a woman who'd left her past behind and was stepping into a perfect future. Emma stood up on her chair to see better, and Jake steadied her automatically. "Mommy's pretty," Emma whispered. "Very pretty," Jake agreed. Allison's eyes swept the crowd as she walked down the aisle. They landed on Emma for a brief moment, her expression flickering with something Jake couldn't quite read. Then, she looked away, her smile never wavering. The ceremony began. The officiant, a friend of Richard's named Bradley Stokes, kept it mercifully brief. Standard vows, exchange of rings, the usual pronouncements. Jake watched it all with detachment, his mind already on what came next. "You may kiss the bride," Bradley announced. Richard pulled Allison into a dramatic kiss that earned applause from the crowd. Then they turned, newly married, and began the recessional back down the aisle. This was when things deviated from the plan. Instead of walking directly to the reception area for photos, Allison stopped midway down the aisle. Richard looked confused for a moment, then seemed to understand. He gestured to someone off to the side, and Stacy Woods appeared with a microphone. Jake's instincts screamed warning. "Before we head to the reception," Allison said into the microphone, her voice amplified across the ballroom, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge how special this day is." Applause rippled through the crowd. Emma was still standing on her chair, watching her mother with hopeful eyes. "Richard and I are so grateful to everyone here for celebrating with us," Allison continued. She looked radiant, commanding the room with practiced ease. "This is a fresh start for us. A new chapter." She paused, and Jake saw it coming a split second before it happened. Saw the way her eyes hardened, the way Richard's smile turned sharp. A new chapter means leaving old mistakes behind. Allison's gaze landed on Emma, and Jake moved without thinking, stepping in front of his daughter. Unfortunately, some mistakes are harder to leave in the past than others. The ballroom went quiet. People shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. "Emma, sweetheart, come here," Allison called out. Jake's hand tightened on Emma's shoulder. "You don't have to." But Emma was already moving, conditioned to obey her mother. She climbed down from the chair and walked toward Allison, her yellow dress bright against the white aisle runner. Allison reached down and pulled Emma up onto the small stage, where she and Richard stood. Emma looked tiny next to them, confused but trying to smile. "This is my daughter," Allison said to the crowd, as if they didn't already know. "And I love her. But Richard and I have decided that our family needs to move forward without certain complications." Jake was already moving down the aisle, but Allison spoke faster. "Emma will be attending boarding school in Connecticut starting this fall. It's a wonderful opportunity for her to get the education and structure she needs." Allison's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Unfortunately, that means she won't be joining us for the reception today. This is an adults-only celebration, and we need to establish those boundaries now." Emma's face crumpled. "But Mommy, don't argue, sweetheart." Allison's tone was saccharine. "You understand, don't you? You're not really invited to this part." Then, she did it. The thing Jake would replay in his mind for years. Allison lifted her bouquet, a cascade of white roses and orchids, and tossed it directly at Emma's face. Not gently, not playfully. With force, the flowers hit Emma square in the chest. She stumbled backward, started to fall, and Jake lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Emma sobbed into his shoulder, her small body shaking. The ballroom was dead silent, except for her crying. Jake stood slowly, Emma in his arms. He looked at Allison, at Richard, at the 300 guests watching with expressions ranging from shock to carefully neutral observation. "Actually," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly across the ballroom, "she is invited." He pulled out his phone with his free hand, keeping Emma secure against his chest. The Bluetooth adapter synced instantly with the ballroom's projection system. Doug's device worked perfectly. The large screen behind the altar, previously displaying a montage of Allison and Richard's engagement photos, flickered. "What are you?" Allison started. Jake pressed play. The screen lit up with the first recording. Audio only, but crystal clear. Allison's voice filled the ballroom. "She's so fucking needy. Always wanting stories. Wanting attention. I can't wait until she's older and less exhausting." Richard's response: "You should send her to that boarding school in Connecticut." Jake watched the crowd's faces. Watched Allison's parents, Gary and Jeanette, go rigid in their seats. Watched Warren McDaniel pull out his phone, probably preparing to intervene legally. The recording continued, Richard discussing how to minimize the father's involvement post-marriage. Allison laughing about exaggerating Jake's behavior during the divorce. Richard losing his temper with Emma. The sound of his hand slamming the table, making several guests flinch. "Turn it off," Allison hissed, rushing toward Jake. But the presentation was timed. Next came the video clips. Richard screaming at the valet, shoving the hostess. The doorbell camera footage of Allison denying Emma dinner because she'd asked about her father attending the wedding. All 300 guests watched in horrified silence. The final clip was the most recent. Emma's therapy session from 3 weeks ago, which Dr. Rita Wise had agreed to record with Emma's permission after Jake explained what was happening. Emma's small voice: "I don't think Mommy wants me anymore. Richard says I'm a problem." Dr. Wise's gentle response: "Why do you think that?" "Because they talk about sending me away where I can't bother them, and Daddy won't be able to visit because it's really far." Emma had started crying in the recording. "I just want Mommy to love me like she used to." The screen went black. The ballroom remained silent. Jake looked at Allison, who stood frozen on the stage, her perfect face contorted with rage and humiliation. Richard was red-faced, looking ready to explode. Warren McDaniel was already making his way toward them, his expression calculating. "You had no right," Allison started. "I have every right." Jake's voice was steel. "I'm her father, and I will not let you erase her from your life like she's some inconvenient detail." "That recording is illegal," Warren interjected, reaching them. "You'll be facing charges for invasion of privacy, harassment." "Colorado is a one-party consent state," Jake said calmly. "Emma was present for every conversation, and the video from my own doorbell camera is perfectly legal." He looked at Warren directly. "But please, call the police. I'd love to explain to them why you're more concerned about privacy laws than child welfare." Gary Winter was standing now, his face ashen. "Allison, is this true? Did you really say those things about Emma?" Allison's mouth opened and closed. Daddy, you don't understand. Jake manipulated. I heard your voice, Gary said quietly. I heard what you said about our granddaughter. Jeanette was crying, her hands over her mouth. Around the ballroom, guests were whispering, pulling out their phones. Jake knew the videos were already being shared, uploaded, spread across social media. By tomorrow, everyone in Allison and Richard's social circle would know exactly who they really were. I think we should go, Jake said, adjusting Emma in his arms. She'd stopped crying, but was still trembling. You've ruined everything, Allison spat, her composure shattering. You miserable, pathetic. I showed everyone the truth. Jake's voice was quiet but firm. You did this to yourself. He turned and walked back down the aisle, Emma's face buried in his shoulder. The crowd parted for them like water. No one tried to stop them. Behind him, he heard Richard shouting, Allison crying, chaos erupting. Warren was probably already on the phone with his legal team. Gary and Jeanette were confronting their daughter. The perfect wedding was disintegrating in real time. Jake carried Emma out of the ballroom, through the marble halls, into the June sunshine. His car was waiting where he'd parked it, deliberately close to the exit. He buckled Emma into her car seat and got behind the wheel. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline catching up with him. Daddy? Emma's voice was small. Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong. Jake twisted in his seat to look at her. Nothing at all. This is all going to be okay. Is Mommy mad at you? Probably. He managed to smile. But that's okay too. As they drove away from the country club, Jake's phone started ringing. Lester Darling, Morris Massey. Numbers he didn't recognize. He silenced them all and focused on driving. Emma fell asleep before they reached the highway, exhausted from the emotional toll. Jake drove carefully, protectively, his daughter's soft breathing the only sound he needed. What he'd done today would have consequences. Legal ones, probably. Social ones, certainly. But as he glanced in the rearview mirror at Emma's sleeping face, he felt no regret. Justice, he'd learned, sometimes required breaking the rules everyone else followed, and protecting his daughter was worth any price he'd have to pay. The war was just beginning, but Jake Tanner had fired the opening shot, and he'd made damn sure it counted. The media explosion happened faster than even Jake anticipated. By Sunday morning, his phone had 47 missed calls, and his email was flooded with messages from reporters, bloggers, and random strangers who'd seen the wedding video online. Someone had recorded his presentation on their phone and uploaded it everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Reddit. By noon, number wedding exposure was trending nationally. Jake ignored all of it and made Emma pancakes. The strawberries looked like hearts, Emma observed, poking at her breakfast. She seemed lighter than yesterday, as if some invisible weight had lifted. Are you sad about Mommy's wedding? No, sweetheart. I'm not sad. Jake sat across from her with his coffee. The truth was more complicated. He wasn't sad. But he wasn't triumphant either. What he'd done had been necessary, but it didn't erase the fact that Emma's mother had publicly called her a mistake. That wound would take time to heal. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Morris Massey, so Jake answered. Have you seen the news? Morris asked without preamble. I've been avoiding it. Probably wise. But Jake, listen, you've got national attention now. Good Morning America wants an interview. So does the Today Show. CNN is calling you a whistleblower for parental rights. Fox is calling you a vindictive ex-husband who violated privacy laws. It's chaos. Jake rubbed his temples. I'm not doing interviews. That's probably smart too. But you should know Warren McDaniel held a press conference this morning. Allison and Richard are claiming you doctored the recordings. They're threatening to sue for defamation, emotional distress, and about 6 other things. Let them sue. Jake's voice was flat. Every recording is time-stamped and backed up in 3 locations. I've got Dr. Wise's testimony about Emma's emotional state. I've got my doorbell camera footage showing Allison denying our daughter food as punishment. If they want to take this to court, I'll bury them in discovery. Morris was quiet for a moment. You've really thought this through. I've had 2 years to think it through. After they hung up, Jake finally looked at the news coverage. Morris hadn't been exaggerating. The video from the wedding had been viewed over 12 million times. The comment sections were vicious, split between people praising Jake for exposing abuse and people condemning him for ruining a wedding. But the tide seemed to be turning in Jake's favor. Parenting blogs were analyzing the recordings. Child psychologists were weighing in on Emma's therapy session, and several prominent family law attorneys were calling for an investigation into how Allison had been granted primary custody in the first place. Then, Jake saw the statement from Richard Foley's dealerships. All three locations had released identical statements distancing themselves from their owners' personal matters and promising that the values expressed in the leaked recordings do not reflect our company culture. It was corporate speak for "we're terrified customers will boycott us." Jake's email pinged with a message from Lester Darling. Emergency hearing scheduled for Wednesday, 9 a.m. Judge Betsy Ferguson wants to see both parties immediately regarding custody arrangements. "Call me," Jake called. "This is what you wanted," Lester said, and he didn't sound happy. "But Jake, you need to understand what's coming. Warren is going to paint you as an obsessive stalker who violated his ex-wife's privacy and traumatized their daughter at a wedding. He's going to demand supervised visitation, maybe even a restraining order. Based on what grounds? I provided evidence of abuse and neglect. Based on the grounds that you secretly recorded conversations and ambushed them at their wedding." Lester sighed. "I'm not saying he's right. I'm saying he's going to make those arguments, and Judge Ferguson might be sympathetic. She doesn't like courtroom theatrics. This wasn't theatrics. This was evidence presentation. In a ballroom in front of 300 people." Lester's voice rose. "Jake, I'm on your side. But you went nuclear, and there will be fallout. Wednesday's hearing would be critical." Jake knew that. But he also knew something Warren McDaniel didn't. Jake had more evidence. The recordings he'd played at the wedding were carefully selected for maximum impact, but they weren't everything. He had 3 months of documented conversations, videos, text messages that Allison thought were private, emails between Richard and his attorney about the Emma problem. If Warren wanted to fight dirty, Jake was ready. The rest of Sunday passed quietly. Emma wanted to watch movies, so they built a blanket fort in the living room and binged her favorite animated films. She didn't mention the wedding, and Jake didn't bring it up. But when she fell asleep against his shoulder during the third movie, she was smiling. Monday morning, Jake returned to Lincoln High School, expecting awkward conversations and administrative meetings. Instead, he found a note from Principal Dave Farley requesting his presence immediately. Dave's office was a cluttered space filled with academic awards and photos of students. Dave himself was 62, 3 years from retirement, and deeply pragmatic about the messy realities of his teachers' lives. "Coffee?" Dave offered, gesturing to the Keurig in the corner. "I'm fine." Jake sat down, waiting for the lecture about bringing negative attention to the school. "Good, because I'm drinking yours." Dave made himself a cup and sat behind his desk. "So, you blew up the internet this weekend." "Apparently. I've had 17 calls from parents. 8 support you completely. 7 think you're unhinged. 2 aren't sure, but wanted to express opinions anyway." Dave sipped his coffee. "The school board meets tonight. They'll discuss whether your very public personal drama reflects poorly on Lincoln High." Jake's stomach dropped. "Are they going to fire me?" "Not if I have anything to say about it." Dave set down his mug. "Jake, you're one of the best teachers we have. Your students love you. Your test scores are excellent, and you've never once brought personal issues into your classroom. What you did this weekend..." He paused. "I'm a father too. If someone treated my daughter the way your ex-wife treated Emma, I'd want to burn the world down. I didn't burn anything. I just showed people the truth. You showed 300 people and 12 million internet viewers the truth." Dave smiled slightly. "There's a difference. But the point is, I'm backing you with the board. You have my full support." Relief flooded through Jake. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over. And you know it." Dave leaned forward. "Whatever happens Wednesday at that hearing, you need to be prepared for Allison and her attorney to come at you with everything. They're humiliated, and humiliated people get desperate." Jake nodded. "I know. Do you also know that half the parents who called are now questioning how custody cases are handled in family court? You've started something bigger than just your own case." That hadn't occurred to Jake. He'd been so focused on Emma, on his immediate battle, that he hadn't considered the broader implications. But Dave was right, the recordings had exposed more than just Allison and Richard's cruelty. They'd exposed how easily the system could be manipulated, how a good actor with a skilled attorney could rewrite reality. "I just wanted my daughter safe," Jake said quietly. "I know. But sometimes individual battles become movements." Dave stood, signaling the end of their meeting. "Watch your back, Jake. And if you need anything you call me." Tuesday brought more chaos. Allison's parents, Gary and Jeanette Winter, showed up at Jake's house unannounced just after Emma left for school. Jake opened the door to find them on his porch, both looking years older than they had at the wedding. "Can we come in?" Gary asked. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying or shouting. "Maybe both." Jake hesitated, then stepped aside. They'd never been close during the marriage. Allison had made sure of that, always painting Jake as the outsider who didn't understand their family dynamics. But they were Emma's grandparents, and they looked genuinely devastated. "Would you like coffee?" Jake offered. "Just water," Jeanette said. She sat on the couch like it might collapse beneath her, her hands twisting in her lap. Jake brought them water and sat across from them. "Waiting?" "We didn't know," Gary finally said. "About what Allison and Richard were planning. About the boarding school. About trying to cut you out of Emma's life. We didn't know any of it. Would you have stopped it if you had?" Jake asked, and he couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "Yes." Jeanette's eyes filled with tears. "Jake, we know we weren't good to you during the divorce. Allison told us things, and we believed her. We thought you were controlling, that you tried to isolate her from us. I never did any of that. We know." Gary's voice cracked. "We heard the recording, the one where she admitted to exaggerating for the court. And we realized we helped her do this to you. We testified against you. We told the judge you were unreliable." Jake remembered that day clearly. Jeanette, on the stand, explaining how Jake had gotten angry when Allison wanted to visit her parents. In reality, Jake had been frustrated because Allison had canceled Emma's birthday party to drive to her parents' house for a non-emergency. But Jeanette's testimony had been delivered with tearful conviction, and the judge had believed it. "Why are you here?" Jake asked. "Because we want to help fix this," Gary said. "We're going to testify on your behalf at the hearing Wednesday. We're going to tell Judge Ferguson that we were wrong, that we were manipulated, and that Emma belongs with you." Jake stared at them. "You'd go against your own daughter?" "Our daughter," Jeanette said firmly, threw a bouquet at our granddaughter's face and called her a mistake in front of 300 people. "I don't know who that woman is, but she's not the daughter I raised." She wiped her eyes. "Emma deserves better. You deserve better, and we're going to make this right. Warren will destroy you on cross-examination," Jake warned. "He'll make it look like you're only turning against Allison because of public pressure. Let him try." Gary's jaw set stubbornly. "We've already contacted an attorney. We're prepared to file for grandparent visitation rights as well, to support your custody case. We'll do whatever it takes." For the first time since the wedding, Jake felt hope kindle in his chest. Allison's parents testifying against her would be devastating to Warren's defense. Combined with Jake's evidence, it might actually be enough to win. "Thank you," Jake said, and meant it. They stayed for another hour, asking about Emma, apologizing repeatedly, trying to rebuild a bridge that Allison had spent years burning. When they left, Gary shook Jake's hand firmly. "Wednesday morning, we'll be there." "And Jake? What you did at that wedding took courage. Not everyone would have fought back." Jake watched them drive away, then sat on his porch steps and let himself breathe. The pieces were falling into place. Allison's own parents had turned against her. Public opinion was shifting. The hearing was in less than 24 hours. But he knew better than to get comfortable. Warren McDaniel was dangerous precisely because he was skilled at turning disasters into victories. He'd find some angle, some way to spin this. Jake needed to be ready for anything. That night, after Emma was asleep, Jake reviewed his entire evidence file one more time. Every recording, every video, every document. He created a timeline, cross-referenced dates, made sure his narrative was airtight. Then he did something he'd been avoiding. He listened to the voicemail Allison had left him Sunday night. Her voice was raw with fury. "You've destroyed me. Jake, destroyed us. Richard's family is threatening to cut him off unless he annuls the marriage. His businesses are hemorrhaging customers. My friends won't return my calls. All because you couldn't let me be happy. She took a shaky breath. But I'm not done. Warren says we can prove those recordings were manipulated. We'll get a forensic analysis. Show that you edited them to make me look bad. And when we do, you'll lose Emma forever. I'll make sure you never see her again. You'll be the cautionary tale every father fears, the one who fought too hard and lost everything. The voicemail ended. Jake deleted it and made a note to tell Lester about it. Empty threats, probably, but worth documenting. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Rita Wise. Prepared to testify tomorrow if needed. Emma's welfare is what matters. You did the right thing. Another text. From Morris. Doug says good luck tomorrow. Also, he's been contacted by 3 other divorced dads asking about that Bluetooth adapter. You've started a revolution. Jake smiled despite himself. A revolution. He just wanted to protect his daughter. But if exposing one case of parental manipulation helped others see the truth about their own situations, maybe that was worth something too. Wednesday morning arrived, cold and gray, threatening rain. Jake, dressed in his best suit, dropped Emma off with Morris and his wife Elena McCall for the day, and drove to the courthouse with his evidence file and a thermos of coffee he'd barely touched. Lester was waiting on the courthouse steps. Gary and Jeanette are already inside. So is Dr. Wise. Warren just arrived with Allison and Richard. He paused. Jake, you need to prepare yourself. Allison looks bad. Really bad. Like she hasn't slept in days. Good, Jake said, and meant it. Judge Betsy Ferguson's courtroom was smaller than Jake remembered from the divorce proceedings. Or maybe it just felt smaller because the stakes were so much higher. Allison sat at the defense table with Warren, wearing a conservative navy suit, her hair pulled back severely. She looked diminished somehow, her usual confidence replaced with barely contained rage. Richard sat behind her, his expression stony. Gary and Jeanette sat on Jake's side of the courtroom. So did Dr. Wise, Morris, and Emma's kindergarten teacher Cecilia Sampson, who'd contacted Jake Sunday night to offer her support. Judge Ferguson entered, and everyone stood. She was in her mid-50s, known for being fair but no nonsense. She presided over Jake and Allison's divorce and had granted Allison primary custody based on her testimony and Warren's carefully constructed narrative. We're here, Judge Ferguson began, settling into her chair. Because of events that occurred this past Saturday at the wedding of Allison Baxter and Richard Foley. Events that have been viewed by millions of people and have raised serious questions about the current custody arrangement of minor child Emma Tanner. She looked at Jake. Mr. Tanner, you presented recordings and videos at your ex-wife's wedding that allegedly show her and her new husband planning to send Emma to boarding school and discussing ways to limit your parental involvement. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Jake stood. I did so because I believed Emma was in danger of being removed from my life entirely, and because I had evidence that Miss Baxter and Mr. Foley were emotionally abusing her. Those recordings were obtained illegally, Warren interjected, standing. My client's privacy was violated, and Mr. Tanner's actions constitute harassment and possibly stalking under Colorado law. Colorado is a one-party consent state for recordings, Lester countered. Emma was present during all recorded conversations, making them legal under state law. As for the accusation of stalking, Mr. Tanner attended a wedding he was invited to and presented evidence of child welfare concerns. That's not stalking, that's advocacy. Judge Ferguson held up a hand. I'll determine what's legal and what isn't. Mr. McDaniel, do you have evidence that these recordings were doctored or manipulated in any way? Warren hesitated. We're in the process of obtaining forensic analysis. So, that's a no. Judge Ferguson's expression was stern. Mr. Tanner, I'm going to listen to these recordings in full. Then, I'm going to hear testimony from both sides. Then I'm going to make a determination about Emma's custody arrangement going forward. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor, Jake and Warren said in unison. The next 3 hours were brutal. Jake played every recording in sequence, watching Judge Ferguson's expression grow darker with each one. When they got to the recording of Richard calling Emma pathetic, the judge's jaw tightened visibly. Allison testified next, and Warren did his best to salvage the situation. She claimed the recordings were taken out of context, that she'd been venting frustrations but never meant what she said. Every mother gets overwhelmed, she said, tears streaming down her face. But I love Emma. I would never hurt her. You threw a bouquet at her face and called her a mistake in front of 300 people, Judge Ferguson said flatly. How do you explain that? I was stressed. The wedding, the pressure, I made a terrible mistake in the moment. Allison's voice broke. But Jake has been harassing us for months. He's obsessed with destroying my happiness. By presenting evidence of your plans to send Emma to boarding school without his consent, Judge Ferguson didn't sound convinced. Gary and Jeanette testified next, and their statements were devastating. They admitted to lying during the divorce proceedings, to believing Allison's manipulation, to helping her paint Jake as unstable. We were wrong, Gary said firmly, and we're here to make it right. Emma belongs with her father. Dr. Wise's testimony was clinical and damning. She explained Emma's anxiety, her fear of disappointing her mother, her expressed belief that she was unwanted. In my professional opinion, Dr. Wise concluded, Emma has been subjected to ongoing emotional abuse. Her current custody arrangement is not in her best interests. Warren tried to undermine Dr. Wise by suggesting she was biased, but it backfired when she calmly presented 3 months of detailed session notes documenting Emma's deteriorating mental state. Richard testified reluctantly, admitting that yes, he'd discussed boarding school options, but insisting it was for Emma's own good, to give her opportunities. His defensiveness made him look worse, not better. Finally, Judge Ferguson called a recess. I need time to review the evidence and testimony. We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock for my ruling. The lunch break was agonizing. Lester tried to reassure Jake, but both of them knew this could go either way. Judges didn't like being made to look foolish, and Judge Ferguson had been the one who'd granted Allison primary custody in the first place. She might rule against Jake just to avoid admitting she'd been wrong. 2 o'clock came. Everyone filed back into the courtroom. Judge Ferguson's expression was unreadable. I've reviewed all evidence and testimony, she began, and I'm prepared to make my ruling. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. First, regarding the recordings, while the method of obtaining them exists in a legal gray area, the content is deeply concerning. The discussions about boarding school, about limiting Mr. Tanner's involvement, and particularly the emotional abuse documented in these recordings, cannot be ignored. Allison's face went pale. Second, regarding the incident at the wedding, Miss Baxter, your behavior toward Emma was cruel and unacceptable. Regardless of stress or circumstances, throwing an object at a child and publicly calling her a mistake is not something I can overlook. Your Honor, Warren started. I'm not finished, Mr. McDaniel. Judge Ferguson's tone was ice. Third, the testimony from Emma's grandparents and her therapist paints a clear picture of a child who is suffering in her current environment. Dr. Wise's professional assessment is particularly compelling. She looked directly at Allison. Miss Baxter, I made a mistake 2 years ago. I believed your testimony during the divorce proceedings, and I granted you primary custody based on that testimony. I now understand that testimony was, at best, exaggerated and, at worst, completely fabricated. Your Honor, that's not, Allison began. It is. Judge Ferguson cut her off. I heard the recording where you admitted as much to your friend. You manipulated this court, Miss Baxter, and in doing so, you harmed your daughter and your ex-husband. She turned to Jake. Mr. Tanner, while I don't condone your methods, I understand why you felt they were necessary. The system failed Emma, and you took matters into your own hands. Jake held his breath. Therefore, I am hereby modifying the custody arrangement as follows. Mr. Tanner is awarded primary physical custody of Emma, effective immediately. Miss Baxter will have supervised visitation every other weekend, pending successful completion of parenting classes and ongoing therapy. Allison gasped. You can't. I can, and I am. Judge Ferguson's voice was firm. Additionally, I am ordering a full investigation into the custody proceedings from 2 years ago. If it is determined that false testimony was given under oath, perjury charges may be filed. Warren was on his feet. Your Honor, I request a stay of this order pending appeal. Request denied. This order is effective immediately. Miss Baxter, you will turn over Emma's belongings to Mr. Tanner by the end of this week. Any attempt to interfere with this custody arrangement will result in contempt charges. Judge Ferguson banged her gavel. We're adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Allison was screaming at Warren, who was already on his phone. probably calling for emergency appeals. Richard stormed out, his face red with fury. Gary and Jeanette were crying with relief. Jake sat motionless, barely processing what had just happened. He'd won. Lester grabbed his shoulder. "Jake, you did it. You actually did it." "I need to get Emma," Jake said, standing on shaky legs. "I need to tell her." "Go." Lester grinned. "I'll handle the paperwork." Jake left the courthouse in a daze, got in his car, and drove to Morris's house. Elena answered the door with a knowing smile. "I take it the hearing went well?" "I got primary custody," Jake said, and saying it out loud made it real. "Daddy!" Emma came running, throwing herself into his arms. "Did you see Mommy?" "I did. Sweetheart." Jake held her tightly, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "And I have something to tell you. You're going to be living with me from now on. Is that okay?" Emma pulled back to look at him, her blue eyes wide. "Every day?" "Every day. Even school days?" "Especially school days." Emma's face broke into the biggest smile Jake had seen in years. "Really? I get to stay with you all the time?" "All the time," Jake confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "You're home, Em. You're finally home." She hugged him again, and Jake closed his eyes, letting relief and gratitude wash over him. The fight had been brutal. The cost had been high, but his daughter was safe, and that was all that mattered. Behind him, he heard Morris tell Elena quietly, "I'll be damned. The good guy actually won." Sometimes, Jake thought, carrying Emma to his car, justice required more than patience and proper channels. Sometimes it required burning everything down and rebuilding from the ashes. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was exactly what the world needed. 3 months later, Jake stood in Emma's new bedroom, her permanent bedroom, and watched her hang drawings on the wall. She'd started art therapy with Dr. Wise, processing everything that had happened through colors and shapes. The drawings were getting happier, brighter, more purple and yellow, less gray and black. "This one's us at the zoo," Emma explained, pointing to a stick figure drawing of a man and girl surrounded by elephants. "Remember when I got to feed the elephant a carrot?" "I remember." Jake smiled. "You were so brave. I wasn't scared because you were there." She said it matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from Gary. "Emma's birthday party this weekend. Jeanette made her favorite cake. See you Saturday?" Jake had been hesitant about rekindling relationships with Allison's parents, but they'd proven themselves genuine. They visited every Sunday, bringing Emma small gifts and apologizing repeatedly for their role in the divorce. They'd also testified at the perjury investigation, which had resulted in Warren McDaniel facing potential disbarment for suborning perjury. Allison herself was facing charges, though her attorney a new one. Not Warren was working on a plea deal. Another text. This one from Morris. "Drinks Friday? Doug wants to meet the man, the myth, the legend who broke the internet." Jake smiled and texted back, "Can't. Emma's school concert Friday. Rain check?" Life had settled into a new rhythm. Jake had Emma full-time, with Allison getting supervised visits every other Saturday. Those visits were awkward and brief. Allison seemed uncertain how to interact with Emma now that the facade had crumbled, and Emma was hesitant to trust her mother again. Dr. Wise said that was normal, that rebuilding would take time. Maybe years, maybe never. Richard's marriage to Allison had lasted 6 weeks. He'd filed for annulment citing fraud, claiming Allison had misrepresented her relationship with Emma and the potential legal consequences. The annulment was granted. His businesses had recovered somewhat, though he'd lost several major contracts and his reputation was permanently stained. The viral video had spawned a small movement. Jake received emails weekly from other parents, mostly fathers, but some mothers who'd been alienated from their children through similar manipulation. Some asked for advice. Some just wanted to share their stories. Jake responded when he could, but mostly he focused on Emma and rebuilding their life together. The school board had kept him on at Lincoln High, though Principal Dave had quietly suggested Jake might want to avoid parent-teacher conferences for a while. "Some parents think you're a hero," Dave had explained. "Others think you're a cautionary tale about what happens when people air their dirty laundry publicly. Best to let things cool down." Jake had agreed. He taught his classes, graded papers, and went home to his daughter every evening. That was enough. Emma finished hanging her drawings and turned to him. "Daddy, Can we get pizza for dinner? Absolutely. Jake ruffled her hair. Extra cheese? And pepperoni. She ran ahead of him, her footsteps thundering down the stairs in the way only a happy child's could. Jake followed more slowly, taking in the house he'd fought so hard to make into a home. It wasn't perfect. There were still boxes to unpack, repairs to make, 1,000 small tasks to complete. But it was theirs. Safe and stable and full of the kind of love that didn't come with conditions or cruelty. His phone rang. Lester Darling's name flashed on the screen. Hey, Lester. What's up? Just wanted to give you a heads up. Warren's disbarment hearing is next month. They're calling you as a witness. Jake had been expecting this. The state bar had taken the perjury charges seriously, launching a full investigation into Warren's practices. They'd found a pattern, coaching clients to exaggerate, helping them construct false narratives, exploiting gray areas in family law to win cases regardless of truth. I'll testify, Jake said. Whatever they need. I figured you would. Also, there's something else. Lester paused. I got a call from a documentary filmmaker. They want to tell your story. Make a short film about parental alienation and fighting for custody. Jake's immediate instinct was to refuse. He'd never wanted fame or attention, but then he thought about those emails, about all the parents who'd reached out with similar stories. Maybe sharing his experience could help others navigate the system. Maybe it could prevent other children from suffering the way Emma had. Let me think about it, Jake said. After they hung up, Jake found Emma in the kitchen, already pulling out plates for pizza. She was humming to herself, some song from her last school concert. Hey, Jake said, sitting at the kitchen table. Can I ask you something? Sure, Daddy. Are you happy? Living here, I mean, with just us. Emma stopped humming and looked at him seriously. I'm really happy. I don't have to worry about being bad anymore, or being too loud, or making Richard mad. She came over and climbed into his lap, even though she was getting too big for it. I just get to be me. Jake hugged her tightly, blinking back tears. You always get to be you, sweetheart. Always. I know. She said it with such simple confidence that Jake's heart swelled. Because you love me no matter what. That's right. No matter what. They ordered pizza, watched a movie, and Jake tucked Emma into bed at 8:30. She fell asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, her face peaceful in the dim glow of her nightlight. Jake stood in her doorway for a long moment, just watching her breathe. 3 months ago, he'd walked into a wedding prepared to blow up his ex-wife's perfect day. He'd been scared, furious, desperate. He'd known the consequences could be severe legal trouble, social ostracism, complete alienation from everyone in Allison's circle. But he'd also known that doing nothing meant losing Emma. The choice had been terrible and necessary. And standing here now, watching his daughter sleep safely in her own room in their home, Jake knew he'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Dr. Wise. Emma's progress is remarkable. You should be proud of both of you. Jake texted back. Thank you. For everything. Then he silenced his phone, checked the locks on all the doors and windows, and settled onto the couch with a book he'd been trying to read for weeks. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of old wood settling and the distant sound of traffic. For the first time in years, Jake felt at peace. The war was over. The battles had been fought and won. And while scars remained Emma's nightmares, Allison's supervised visits, the lingering tension with extended family they were healing. Jake thought about the version of himself from 3 months ago, standing in a wedding ballroom with his phone in his hand and his daughter crying in his arms. That man had been pushed to his absolute limit, forced to choose between propriety and protection. He'd chosen Emma. Every time, without hesitation, and as Jake finally started reading his book, he smiled slightly, thinking about all those emails from other parents asking for advice. If they asked what lesson he'd learned from this whole ordeal, what wisdom he could share, Jake knew exactly what he'd say. Fight for your children. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And when the system fails them, be prepared to burn it all down and rebuild from scratch. Because some battles are worth any cost, and protecting the people you love is always worth fighting for. The documentary premiered 6 months after the custody hearing. Jake had ultimately agreed to participate, with strict conditions. Emma's face would be blurred, her voice altered, her identity protected. The filmmaker, a woman named Joy Fernandez, had understood immediately. This isn't about exploitation, she told Jake during their first meeting. It's about showing how broken the family court system can be and how hard good parents have to fight just to protect their kids. The finished film was 30 minutes long, titled When the System Fails, A Father's Fight. It featured Jake's interviews, recordings from the wedding, testimony from Gary and Jeanette, and analysis from family law experts about how easily courts could be manipulated. It won awards at 3 documentary festivals and sparked renewed debate about custody laws, parental alienation, and the need for reform. Several states began reviewing their family court procedures. Colorado introduced legislation requiring recorded proceedings in all custody cases and stricter penalties for perjury. Jake watched these developments with cautious optimism. Change was slow, and bureaucracy was thick, but at least people were talking about the problem. Emma, meanwhile, was thriving. Second grade brought new friends, better grades, and a confidence Jake hadn't seen in years. She'd started calling his house home without hesitation, decorating her room with posters and trinkets that reflected her actual personality rather than what Allison had imposed. The supervised visits with Allison had dwindled to once a month, then once every 6 weeks. Emma didn't ask to go more often, and Allison didn't push. The relationship was cordial but distant, like acquaintances rather than mother and daughter. Dr. Wise said that might change someday, or it might not. Either way, Emma was learning she didn't need her mother's approval to be happy. Richard Foley had moved to California, selling his dealerships and starting over. Jake had heard through Gary that Richard's family had cut him off financially after the wedding video went viral. Without their backing, his business empire had crumbled. Last Jake heard, Richard was working as a sales manager at someone else's dealership in San Diego. A significant fall from grace. Warren McDaniel had been disbarred. The state bar had found overwhelming evidence of coaching clients to lie, fabricating testimony, and exploiting legal loopholes to win cases regardless of truth or ethics. He'd faced criminal charges as well, 3 counts of suborning perjury. His trial was scheduled for next spring. Allison had taken a plea deal on her perjury charges. 3 years probation, mandatory therapy, and community service. She'd also been ordered to pay Jake's legal fees from both the divorce and the custody modification. The total was substantial, and Jake knew she couldn't afford it. Gary had quietly offered to help, but Jake had declined. Let her figure it out, he'd said. Actions have consequences. Now, standing in the crowd at Emma's second-grade winter concert, Jake watched his daughter sing Jingle Bells with her classmates and felt something he hadn't felt in years, uncomplicated joy. No anxiety about pickup times, no dread of handing Emma over to people who didn't value her, no fear that every goodbye might be the last. Morris stood beside him, recording the concert on his phone. She's got a good voice, Morris observed. She gets it from her mom, Jake admitted. Allison used to sing. That must be complicated, acknowledging the good parts. It is. Jake kept his eyes on Emma. But Emma deserves to know her mother wasn't always the villain. That there were good parts before everything fell apart. The concert ended with a rousing rendition of Frosty the Snowman, and Emma bounded off stage to find Jake. She crashed into him with the force of a small hurricane, chattering about the performance and whether he'd seen her hit the high note. I saw everything, Jake assured her. You were amazing. Can we get hot chocolate on the way home? Absolutely. They stopped at a small cafe near the school, one of Emma's favorite places. She ordered hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and a cookie shaped like a snowman. Jake got coffee and listened to her recap the concert in exhaustive detail, occasionally glancing at his phone to check messages. One message stood out. From Allison's number. I saw the documentary. You made me look like a monster. Jake considered his response carefully. Part of him wanted to fire back that she'd made herself look like a monster through her own words and actions. But that wouldn't help Emma, and it wouldn't change anything. Instead, he typed, I showed the truth. If you look like a monster, maybe consider why that is. He sent it before he could second-guess himself. Then silenced his phone and focused on Emma. Daddy, you're not listening, Emma complained, waving a marshmallow-covered spoon at him. Sorry, sweetheart. You were saying? I said that Lily's mom asked if we wanted to come to her birthday party next weekend. Can we go? Of course. We'll get her a good present. Emma beamed. I like when you say yes to things. What do you mean? Mommy used to say no to everything. Playdates, parties, sleepovers. She said they were too much trouble. Emma dunked her cookie in her hot chocolate. But you say yes. It makes me happy. Jake's throat tightened. I'm glad you're happy, Em. I am. She said it with such conviction that Jake had to look away before he started crying in the middle of the cafe. They finished their drinks and drove home through light snow. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from performing and too much sugar. Jake carried her inside, helped her into pajamas, and tucked her into bed for the second time that evening. Love you, Daddy, she mumbled, already half asleep. Love you too, sweetheart. Jake retreated to his office and pulled up the documentary on his laptop. He'd only watched it once, at the premiere, finding the experience surreal and uncomfortable. But now, alone in his office, he watched it again. Joy Fernandez had done remarkable work. She'd woven together interviews, recordings, and expert testimony into a narrative that was compelling without being exploitative. Jake's story came through clearly. A good father pushed to extremes by a broken system, fighting for his daughter against overwhelming odds. The comment section was still active, even months after release. This made me cry. My ex did the same thing, turned our kids against me. I've been fighting for 3 years. Thank you for sharing your story. You gave me hope that I can win custody of my son. This is why family courts need reform. Too many good parents lose their kids because the system favors whoever lies best. But there were negative comments too. He violated his ex-wife's privacy and ambushed her at her wedding. That's not heroic, that's creepy. The recordings were probably edited to make him look good. We're only hearing one side. If he'd really cared about his daughter, he would have handled this through proper channels, not social media spectacle. Jake read them all, the supportive and the critical, and felt neither vindicated nor ashamed. He'd done what he had to do. Some people would understand that. Others wouldn't. Both reactions were valid. His phone buzzed. Another message from Allison. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know I'm trying to be better. For Emma. Jake stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed, prove it through your actions, not your words. Emma deserves consistency, not promises. This time, Allison didn't respond. Over the next few months, she did start to prove it. The supervised visits became slightly less awkward. She listened when Emma talked instead of interrupting. She asked about school, friends, interests, small things, but genuine. Dr. Wise cautiously suggested increasing visit frequency, and Jake agreed. 1 weekend a month became 2. Supervision was relaxed to a neutral third party instead of a court-appointed monitor. Emma seemed okay with it, which was all that mattered. Is Mommy getting better? Emma asked one night after a visit. I think she's trying, Jake said carefully. Do you want her to get better? Emma considered this seriously. I want her to be nice, like she used to be before Richard. That's fair, but I don't want to live with her again. I want to stay here. You're staying here, Jake promised. That's not changing. Emma nodded, satisfied, and went back to her homework. Jake watched her work, marveling at how resilient children could be. Emma had been through trauma that would have broken many adults. She'd been called a mistake, treated as an inconvenience, caught in the middle of a war she didn't understand. Yet, here she was, doing multiplication tables and planning birthday parties, and slowly, carefully rebuilding a relationship with her mother. She was stronger than Allison, stronger than Richard, maybe even stronger than Jake. The 1-year anniversary of the wedding came and went quietly. Jake had wondered if it would be difficult, triggering old memories and emotions. But the day passed like any other school, dinner, bedtime routine. The wedding itself had become part of their history rather than an open wound. Emma never asked about it, never wanted to watch the video or hear the recordings. That was sad time, she'd said once when Jake gently asked if she wanted to talk about it. I like now time better. Now, time was indeed better. They'd found their rhythm school and work and weekends at the park. Piano lessons on Thursdays. Art therapy on Tuesdays. Sunday dinners with Gary and Jeanette, who'd become regular fixtures in Emma's life. Jake had even started dating, though cautiously, a woman named Kirsten Kane, a librarian at the public library who Emma had met during story time and immediately liked. They'd been on 5 dates, all of them easy and comfortable. Kirsten knew about the custody battle everyone in their small circle did, but she didn't treat Jake like a celebrity or a cautionary tale. She just treated him like a person. You should invite her to dinner, Emma had suggested after meeting Kirsten for the third time. I like her. She's funny. We'll see, Jake had said, not wanting to rush anything. But tonight, finishing up paperwork at his desk, Jake sent Kirsten a text, dinner this weekend. Emma's with her grandparents, Saturday night. The response came quickly. I'd love that. Jake smiled and set down his phone. Life was moving forward. Not perfectly, nothing ever was, but steadily, healthily, in the right direction. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, standing in a ballroom with evidence of his ex-wife's cruelty and a decision to make. That man had been desperate, furious, willing to sacrifice everything for his daughter. Jake was still that man, would always be that man. But he was also more now, a single father who'd learned to balance protection with healing, justice with mercy, truth with moving forward. The wedding video would exist forever on the internet, a digital monument to one family's collapse. But it was no longer the defining moment of Jake's life. It was just a chapter, however dramatic, in a longer story. And the story that mattered, Emma's story, their story together, was still being written. Jake closed his laptop, checked on Emma one last time, deeply asleep, rabbit tucked under her arm, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments, new opportunities to be the father Emma deserved. But for now, in this quiet house with his daughter sleeping safely down the hall, Jake Tanner felt something he'd chased for 2 years and finally caught. Peace. 2 years after the wedding, Emma's 10th birthday party was held at the local bowling alley. 20 kids from her 4th grade class attended, along with their parents, grandparents, Gary and Jeanette, Morris and Elena, and to everyone's surprise, Allison. She'd arrived early, helping Jake set up decorations and carrying in the birthday cake Jeanette had made. They worked together awkwardly but civilly, navigating the strange reality of co-parenting after years of warfare. Thank you for inviting me, Allison said quietly while Emma was off with her friends. I know I don't deserve. Emma wanted you here, Jake interrupted. That's what matters. Allison nodded, blinking back tears. She looked different than she had 2 years ago, older, harder in some ways, but softer in others. Therapy had helped, so had consequences. The probation, the community service, the public humiliation, all of it had forced her to reckon with who she'd become. She'd never be the mother she was before the divorce. That version of Allison was gone, replaced by someone more self-aware, but also more damaged. But she was trying, and Emma had decided that trying was enough to warrant a place in her life. Richard was not invited. Emma had made that clear. He was mean to me, she'd told Jake matter-of-factly. I don't want him at my party. Fair enough. The party was chaotic and loud and perfect. Emma bowled 3 strikes, ate too much cake, and laughed until her face hurt. Jake watched from the sidelines, camera in hand, documenting every moment. Kirsten sat beside him, her hand casually on his knee. They'd been dating for 18 months now, and Emma adored her. Kirsten's nice, Emma had said when Jake asked how she felt about their relationship. She makes you smile. She does, Jake had agreed. Then I like her. Simple logic but effective. As the party wound down and parents started collecting their exhausted children, Emma ran over to Jake and threw her arms around him. Best birthday ever, Daddy. I'm glad, sweetheart. He hugged her tightly. You deserve the best. Can we do it again next year? Absolutely. Though maybe we'll go laser tag next time. Yes. Emma pumped her fist in the air, then ran off to say goodbye to her friends. Allison approached carefully. She seems really happy. She is, Jake confirmed. You've done a good job with her. Better than I ever could have. Jake didn't know how to respond to that. It felt like a trap, or maybe genuine remorse. With Allison, it was sometimes hard to tell. We're figuring it out as we go, he finally said. That's all any parent can do. Allison nodded and left without saying anything else. Jake watched her go, feeling neither satisfaction nor pity. Just a sort of detached acknowledgement that this was their reality, now broken family, fragile peace, trying to do right by a child they'd both failed in different ways. Later, after all the guests had left and Emma had opened her presents in the bowling alley's party room, they drove home through the early evening. Emma chattered about her friends, the presents, the cake. She was wired on sugar and excitement, nowhere near ready for sleep despite it being almost 8 o'clock. Can we watch a movie when we get home? Emma asked. One movie, Jake agreed. Then bed, because you got school tomorrow. Can Kirsten stay for the movie? Jake glanced at Kirsten, who smiled. If that's okay with your dad. More than okay, Jake said. They settled in the living room, Emma between Jake and Kirsten on the couch, and put on some animated film Emma had been wanting to see. Halfway through, Emma fell asleep against Jake's shoulder, worn out from her birthday excitement. Kirsten carefully extracted herself from the couch. I should head home. Let you get her to bed. Thanks for today, Jake said quietly, trying not to wake Emma. It meant a lot. I wouldn't have missed it. Kirsten kissed him softly. She's a great kid. You've done really well with her. After Kirsten left, Jake carried Emma upstairs and tucked her into bed. She stirred slightly, mumbling something about bowling strikes, then settled back into sleep. Jake stood in her doorway, same as he had hundreds of times before, just watching her breathe. She'd be 11 soon, then 12, then a teenager. Eventually, she'd be grown and gone, living her own life. The thought both terrified and excited him. But for now, she was still his little girl, safe in her room, surrounded by birthday presents and drawings on the walls and all the evidence of a childhood that was finally stable. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from Joy Fernandez. When the system fails, just won a regional Emmy. Thought you'd want to know. Another milestone in a story that wouldn't quite end. The documentary continued to circulate, continued to spark discussions, continued to help other parents navigate impossible situations. Jake received fewer emails. Now the initial wave of attention had faded, but the ones he did get were always meaningful. People thanking him for sharing his story. People telling him they'd won custody because his case had set precedent. People asking for advice he wished he didn't have to give. He responded to Joy. Congratulations. Emma says hi. Then he turned off his phone, checked the locks, and settled into his nightly routine. Tomorrow would bring work, school pickups, dinner preparations, homework help, the ordinary rhythms of single parenthood that he'd fought so hard to protect. And as Jake finally headed to bed himself, he thought about that moment 2 years ago, standing in a ballroom with his finger on a phone screen, about to detonate his ex-wife's perfect day. He'd asked himself then if it was worth it, if Emma's well-being justified the scorched earth approach, if he could live with the consequences. Now, with Emma sleeping peacefully upstairs and a stable life built from the ashes of that wedding, Jake had his answer. Worth it. Absolutely. Completely. Unquestionably worth it. And he'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Because that's what fathers did. They protected their children, no matter the cost. They fought impossible battles with whatever weapons they had. They burned down kingdoms if that's what it took to save the people they loved. Jake Tanner had burned down a wedding. But from those ashes, he'd built something better. A home, a life, a future where his daughter could grow up safe and loved and free from the toxicity that had nearly consumed her. Sometimes justice required fire. Sometimes it required standing up in front of 300 people and showing them the ugly truth they'd rather ignore. Sometimes it required becoming the villain in someone else's story so you could be the hero in the one that mattered. And sometimes, when the system failed and the courts wouldn't listen and the only voice left was yours, the only choice was to make damn sure that voice was heard. Jake had made sure. And Emma was safe. That was all that mattered. That was everything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Message. Lucas Davenport stared at the text message on his phone, the blue light illuminating his weathered face in the dimness of the military transport plane. Around him, other soldiers dozed or chatted excitedly about returning home for Christmas, but Lucas felt the blood drain from his face as he read the message again. Christmas is better without you. Mom doesn't want you here either. Don't come. The text was from Aiden, his 16-year-old son. After 3 consecutive deployments with special forces spanning 4 years, with only brief visits home, this was to be Lucas's triumphant return, his first real Christmas with his family in years. He had endured firefights in dust-choked valleys, spent endless nights in forward operating bases, and watched brothers in arms fall beside him, all with a single sustaining thought: I'm doing this for them, for my family. His fingers hovered over the phone. So many responses flooded his mind. Questions, protests, anger. But 17 years of military discipline had taught him economy of expression. He typed a single word: understood. Then he switched to his banking app and made a quiet change to some paperwork. A few taps on the screen transferred funds from a joint accounts to a private one his wife, Melissa, didn't know existed. Lucas had always been prudent. The plane hit turbulence, but Lucas barely registered the jolt. His mind was already racing ahead, tactical planning kicking in. The same skills that had kept him alive in combat now redirected toward a different kind of battlefield. Sergeant Wilson, seated beside him, noticed his expression. Everything all right, Davenport? Bad news from home. Lucas locked his phone. Just a change of plans. Thought you were headed straight to Colorado Springs? Lucas said, his voice even. Now I'm not. Colonel Ray Peters found Lucas in the terminal after they landed at Andrews Air Force Base. The colonel had been Lucas's commanding officer for 7 years and knew him better than most. Davenport, thought you'd be halfway to Colorado by now. Your connecting flight left 20 minutes ago. Lucas glanced up from his laptop. Taking a detour, sir. Colonel Peters studied him. Your wife know about this detour? No, sir. The colonel sat beside him. Trouble at home? Nothing I can't handle. Lucas continued typing, finalizing a rental car reservation. You've been through hell these past few deployments, Davenport. Kandahar. That mess in Syria. The extraction in Yemen. You've earned your homecoming. Lucas stopped typing. Turns out I'm not welcome at home. The colonel's eyebrows rose. Want to talk about it? Not particularly, sir. Fair enough. Peters handed him a business card. My brother-in-law. Best divorce attorney in Virginia. Just in case your detour becomes permanent. Lucas took the card, tucking it into his wallet. Appreciate it, sir. Whatever's happening, remember who you are, Davenport. You're a planner. Don't do anything rash. Lucas smiled thinly. I never do, sir. Everything I do is calculated. 48 hours later, Lucas sat in a modest hotel room in Denver, watching his phone light up with the 13th missed call in 2 hours. This one from a Colorado number he didn't recognize. He let go to voicemail. When the notification appeared, he played it back. Mr. Davenport, this is Graham Phillips from Phillips & Waterman Attorneys at Law. I'm representing Melissa Davenport in this matter. It is imperative that we speak immediately regarding the financial actions you've taken. Please call our office as soon as possible. Lucas checked his watch. Then he opened his laptop and refreshed the banking page. The transfer had cleared. The second phase of his plan could begin. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a strategist. And Melissa had forgotten that. Chapter 2. The Discovery. Lucas remembered his wedding day 16 years ago. Melissa had been radiant in her simple white dress, her auburn hair catching the sunlight. Back then, he'd been a young lieutenant with dreams of making a difference, and she'd been a dedicated nurse with a compassionate heart. They'd built a life together brick by brick. The house in Colorado Springs, the birth of Aiden, and 3 years later, their daughter Nora. The long deployments had started taking their toll during his 3rd tour. Lucas had tried to bridge the distance. Video calls whenever possible, care packages sent for birthdays and anniversaries, planning special trips during his leaves. But something had changed over the past year. Melissa's calls grew shorter, her letters less frequent. He'd attributed it to the stress of managing everything alone. Now, sitting in a nondescript rental car outside his own home, Lucas realized how naive he'd been. A silver Audi he didn't recognize sat in his driveway, next to Melissa's SUV. Through binoculars, Lucas watched as a tall man with salt and pepper hair emerged from his front door, followed by Melissa. They embraced on the porch, not a friendly hug, but an intimate one that ended with a lingering kiss. Lucas remained perfectly still his breathing controlled as he had been trained to do while on surveillance missions. He snapped several photos with his phone and then started the car. As he pulled away, he caught sight of Aiden watching from an upstairs window. Their eyes met briefly before Lucas drove off. His next stop was Riverdale High School. He waited in the parking lot until the final bell rang and students began streaming out. It took him 10 minutes to spot Nora among the crowd. His 14-year-old daughter had grown taller since he'd last seen her, her hair now styled differently, but he'd recognize her anywhere. He watched as she climbed into a friend's car, laughing at something. No sign that her world was crumbling. No indication that she'd participated in sending that text. But he needed to be sure. That evening, Lucas followed the silver Audi to an upscale neighborhood in the northern part of the city. The man, who Lucas now knew from a simple DMV record search, was Dr. Nathaniel Wilcox, chief of surgery at Memorial Hospital where Melissa worked, pulled into the driveway of a large Tudor-style home. Lucas parked and walked to a coffee shop with a view of the house. He opened his laptop and, using skills acquired during intelligence operations, accessed public records about Dr. Wilcox. Divorced 3 years ago. 2 previous marriages, both ended the same way. A pattern was emerging. His phone rang again, Melissa. He declined the call and checked his email instead. The message from his old army buddy, now working in digital security, contained exactly what he'd asked for: access to Melissa's text message history. It was in black and white. The affair had been going on for 18 months. Messages planning rendezvous while Lucas was deployed. Discussions about their future together. And most damning of all, conversations about how to tell Lucas they wanted a divorce. Time for maximum financial advantage to Melissa. But the text that truly chilled his blood wasn't from Melissa to Nathaniel. It was from Melissa to Aiden, sent the day before Lucas received that crushing message. Your father's coming home tomorrow. Remember what we discussed. It's better this way. Dr. Wilcox will be a better father figure for you and Nora. Be strong. Lucas closed his laptop. His son hadn't betrayed him on his own. He'd been manipulated. But that didn't excuse his actions. Not entirely. As darkness fell, Lucas made his way to a different hotel, paid in cash, and began meticulously planning his next moves. Colonel Peters had been right about one thing. Lucas was a planner. But he'd been wrong about another. Sometimes calculated looked a lot like rash to people who didn't understand strategy. Lucas's phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Ted Phillips, your wife's attorney. You need to respond immediately or face legal consequences. Lucas typed back a single word, understood. Then he turned off his phone and continued planning. Chapter 3, The Strategy. The modest office building in downtown Denver housed Hanover Investigations, a private firm run by Dominic Foster, a former Marine who'd served with Lucas in Iraq during his first tour. Lucas hadn't called ahead, but Dominic's face lit up with recognition when he walked through the door. Davenport, heard you were still getting shot at overseas. The burly ex-Marine embraced him in a bear hug. Just got back, Lucas said, returning the hug with less enthusiasm. Dominic pulled back, studying his friend's face. This isn't a social call, is it? I need your help, Dom. An hour later, they sat surrounded by printouts of text messages, bank statements, and property records. Dominic whistled low. Your wife and the good doctor have been busy. Joint checking account opened 6 months ago. Weekend trips while you were deployed. And it looks like they've been house hunting together. He pointed to a series of emails. These are for viewings of properties in Aspen. Second homes. Vacation spots. Paid for with what money? Lucas asked, though he already knew the answer. Dominic met his eyes. Yours, brother. Your military salary. Your investment portfolio. And it looks like they've been accessing your grandfather's trust fund, the one you've been saving for the kids' college. Lucas felt a cold fury settle in his chest. The money didn't matter. What mattered was the betrayal. The calculated deception. What's your play here, Luke? Because running off half your assets and changing some beneficiaries won't be enough if she's got a good attorney. I'm not just changing beneficiaries, Lucas said quietly. I'm changing everything. But I need hard evidence. And I need it fast. Dominic nodded. I can get you everything in 72 hours. But it'll cost you. Money's not an issue. It's not just about the money. Dominic leaned forward. What are you planning to do with this information, Luke? Because if you're thinking about something permanent, I'm not going to kill anyone. If that's what you're asking, Lucas interrupted. I'm a soldier, not a murderer. Good, because I wouldn't help with that. Dominic relaxed slightly. But I will help you burn their world to the ground legally. Just don't cross that line. The only line I'm interested in is the one between what's mine and what's theirs, Lucas assured him. And they've crossed it for the last time. That evening, Lucas checked into yet another hotel under a different name. He had always maintained operational security, a habit from his military career that now served a different purpose. His phone showed 27 missed calls, 15 from Melissa, 8 from her lawyer, 3 from Aiden, and 1 from an unknown number. He listened to the voicemail from the unknown caller. Dad, it's Nora. Mom and Aiden won't tell me what's going on, but I know something's wrong. Mom's been crying, and there are weird men in suits at the house asking questions. Please call me back. I miss you. Lucas closed his eyes. Nora, his sweet, perceptive daughter. The voice message suggested she hadn't been part of the plan to drive him away. He saved the voicemail, but didn't call back. Not yet. First, he needed to be sure. His laptop pinged with an incoming email from Dominic. The subject line read, "First batch of evidence. More coming tomorrow. You were right." Attached were surveillance photos of Dr. Wilcox entering Lucas's home using his own key. Time-stamped images showed him comfortable in Lucas's space, wearing Lucas's robe, drinking from Lucas's coffee mug, little violations that somehow cut deeper than the affair itself. But most valuable was the audio file, legal in Colorado with one-party consent, of Melissa and Nathaniel discussing their plans. Once the divorce is final, we'll sell this place, combine our assets, and build something that's truly ours, Melissa was saying. No more ghosts of Lucas haunting every room. What about the kids? Nathaniel asked. Aiden's already on board. He barely remembers his father anymore, just the broken promises and missed birthdays. Nora will be tougher, but she'll adjust. Children are resilient. And the money? His military pension, the investments? Melissa's laugh was cold, unfamiliar. Colorado is an equitable distribution state. After 16 years of marriage, with him absent for most of it, I'll get at least half of everything. My lawyer says we have a good case for more, given his extended absences. The recording continued, but Lucas had heard enough. They weren't just planning to replace him. They were planning to rob him of everything he'd worked for, including his children. Lucas opened his secure email and composed a message to Colonel Peters. Sir, remember that conversation we had at Andrews? I may need your brother-in-law's services after all. But first, I need a favor only you can provide. He hit send, then called the number for Phillips and Waterman attorneys. This is Lucas Davenport, he said when the receptionist answered. I believe Mr. Phillips has been trying to reach me. One moment, Mr. Davenport. The line clicked, and a smooth, professional voice came on. Mr. Davenport, thank you for finally returning our calls. Your actions have caused my client considerable distress. Have they? Lucas kept his voice neutral. Emptying joint accounts without notice is not looked upon favorably by family courts. I strongly advise you to reverse these transactions immediately. I'll consider that advice, Mr. Phillips. This isn't a negotiation, the lawyer continued. Unless you want to find yourself on the losing end of a very expensive legal battle, you'll transfer those funds back by close of business today. Mr. Phillips, Lucas said calmly. Has your client informed you of the full nature of her relationship with Dr. Nathaniel Wilcox? A pause. I'm not at liberty to discuss. Or about their plans for my children. Or how they've been systematically accessing my grandfather's trust fund for their personal use. A fund explicitly designated for my children's education. Silence. I thought not, Lucas continued. You'll be receiving a package of evidence tomorrow morning. After you've reviewed it, if you still wish to represent Melissa Davenport, we can continue this conversation. Until then, I have nothing further to say. He hung up before the lawyer could respond and turned his attention back to his computer. Phase 1 was complete, securing his assets and gathering evidence. Now came Phase 2, the strategic counterattack. Colonel Peters had taught him an important lesson years ago. In warfare, the objective isn't to fight fair. It's to win decisively. Lucas intended to do exactly that. Chapter 4. The Leverage. 3 days after his return to American soil, Lucas sat across from attorney Victoria Reeves in her downtown Denver office. Colonel Peter's brother-in-law had connected him with Reeves, describing her as a shark who smiles only when she smells blood in the water. The elegant, silver-haired woman reviewed the dossier Lucas had compiled with Dominic's help, her expression remaining impassive until she reached the financial records. Then her eyebrows rose fractionally. Dr. Wilcox has been writing prescriptions for non-existent patients and billing insurance companies, she noted, tapping a manicured nail against the document. And your wife has been falsifying nursing records to cover for him. That's insurance fraud. Yes, Lucas confirmed. And these property purchases in Aspen, using a shell company funded by your grandfather's trust, that's misappropriation of fiduciary funds. Also, yes. Victoria closed the folder. Mr. Davenport, with evidence this comprehensive, we could not only secure you a very favorable divorce settlement, but potentially see your wife and her paramour facing criminal charges. I'm not interested in criminal charges, Lucas clarified. Not yet. I want leverage. For what purpose? My children, Lucas said simply. Melissa has poisoned my son against me. I need time to fix that. Victoria studied him. Most clients in your position want blood. I'm not most clients. I've seen enough bloodshed to last several lifetimes. Very well. She steepled her fingers. Here's what I propose. We prepare divorce filings, but don't submit them immediately. Instead, we arrange a meeting with your wife and her attorney, without Dr. Wilcox present. We present selected evidence and outline terms. What terms? Full physical custody of your children during divorce proceedings. Exclusive access to your family home. Complete separation of your financial assets from hers. And a gag order preventing her from discussing the case with anyone, including Dr. Wilcox. Lucas considered this. They won't agree. They will when the alternative is federal prosecution for insurance fraud. Victoria smiled thinly. People facing prison become remarkably flexible negotiators. Lucas nodded. Set up the meeting. But there's something else I need to do first. That afternoon, Lucas sat in his rental car outside Riverdale High School. When the final bell rang, he spotted Nora immediately. She was walking alone, head down, none of the carefree joy he'd observed days earlier. He stepped out of the car. Nora. His daughter froze, then turned slowly. Her eyes widened. Dad! For a moment, neither moved. Then Nora ran to him, colliding with his chest as his arms wrapped around her. She was sobbing. You came back, she managed between breaths. You got my message. I did. He held her tightly. I'm sorry I didn't call back sooner. She pulled away slightly. Mom said you abandoned us, that you took all our money and disappeared. Lucas felt a sharp stab of anger, but kept his expression gentle. That's not what happened, Nora. But it's complicated. Are you and Mom getting divorced? Probably, he admitted. But that doesn't change how I feel about you, or Aiden. Aiden hates you right now, she said bluntly. He believes everything Mom and Dr. Nate say. Dr. Nate? That's what they want us to call him. Nora rolled her eyes, as if he's suddenly family. Lucas suppressed a surge of fury. Has he been staying at the house? Almost every night since you left. Mom said it's because she's scared you might come back and hurt her. The accusation hit Lucas like a physical blow. Nora, I would never. I know, Dad. Her faith in him was unwavering. I told them that, but they don't listen to me. They treat me like a child. You're a child, Lucas said softly. My child. And I'm going to fix this. How? Do you trust me? She nodded without hesitation. Then I need you to do something for me. Lucas handed her a small, encrypted flash drive. This contains some information. I need you to plug it into your mother's laptop and press the button that says execute. Can you do that? What will it do? Nora asked, examining the device. It will help me protect you and Aiden, Lucas said. And it won't harm anyone. I promise. Nora tucked the drive into her pocket. I'll do it tonight. One more thing, Lucas said. Don't tell anyone you saw me today. Not your brother, not your mother. No one. Can you keep that secret? Yes. She hugged him again. When will I see you again? Soon, Lucas promised. Very soon. As he watched Nora walk away, Lucas felt both pride and sorrow. His daughter's loyalty was a bright spot in this darkness, but the fact that she had been drawn into this mess filled him with regret. Children shouldn't have to choose sides between parents. But Melissa had forced that choice, and now she would face the consequences. Later that night, Lucas's laptop pinged with an alert. The program on a flash drive had been activated. Within seconds, data began flowing to a secure server. Emails, text messages, financial records, browser history. Everything on Melissa's laptop. Among the files was a folder labeled Divorce Strategy. Inside were documents detailing plans that had been in motion for over a year, consultations with attorneys, discussions with financial advisors about hiding assets, and, most disturbingly, a psychological evaluation of Lucas that portrayed him as potentially unstable due to PTSD from his deployments. They had been building a case to paint him as an unfit father, a dangerous man whose military service had left him broken. Lucas's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Meeting set for tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office. Both M and her attorney confirmed. Lucas sent back his acknowledgement, then opened the dossier he'd been building. With the new information from Melissa's laptop, his position was even stronger. The house of cards she and Dr. Wilcox had constructed was about to collapse. His phone rang. Dominic. You need to see this, his friend said without preamble. Wilcox just made a large cash withdrawal and purchased one-way tickets to Cancun for next week. 2 passengers, him and your wife. They're planning to run, Lucas realized. Looks that way. What's your move? Lucas thought for a moment. Let them think their plan is still viable. For now, playing with fire, brother. Fire is only dangerous if you're the one getting burned, Lucas replied. And I have no intention of being anywhere near the flames when they ignite. Chapter 5. The Meeting. Victoria Reeves's conference room projected power and wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Denver. A massive mahogany table that could seat 20, and artwork that Lucas suspected cost more than his annual salary. It was designed to intimidate, and judging by the nervous glances Melissa kept exchanging with her attorney, it was working. Lucas sat beside Victoria, his posture relaxed but alert. Across the table, Melissa looked both angry and afraid, an interesting combination. Her attorney, Graham Phillips, maintained a professional facade, but his frequent checking of his watch betrayed his anxiety. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Victoria began, her voice smooth as polished marble. We have a proposal that could save everyone considerable time, expense, and public embarrassment. Phillips cleared his throat. Before we proceed, my client demands the immediate return of funds Mr. Davenport improperly removed from joint accounts. Victoria smiled, the predatory expression Lucas had been warned about. Mr. Phillips, I'd advise against making demands in your current position. She slid a folder across the table. Please review these documents while we wait. As Phillips opened the folder, Lucas studied his wife. Melissa had always been beautiful, tall and slender with auburn hair and green eyes that had once looked at him with love. Now those same eyes avoided his gaze, focusing instead on her manicured nails. Phillips's face paled as he turned each page. Where did you get these records? Does their provenance matter more than their contents? Victoria countered. These allegations are factual, Victoria interrupted. Every document in that folder has been verified. The insurance fraud alone carries a minimum 5-year federal sentence. Melissa's head snapped up. Insurance fraud? What are you talking about? Phillips placed a restraining hand on her arm. We need to confer privately. By all means, Victoria gestured to a side door. The adjoining room is available. As they left, Lucas remained silent, his eyes fixed on the Denver skyline. He prepared himself for this moment, seeing Melissa confronting the betrayal face to face. What he hadn't expected was the hollow feeling in his chest. Not pain or anger, just emptiness. You're handling this well, Victoria observed quietly. I've had worse days, Lucas replied. Most clients break down or rage. You're remarkably composed. Military training, Lucas explained. Emotion clouds judgment, and I need clear judgment right now. Melissa and Phillips returned 15 minutes later. Phillips looked resigned, while Melissa's earlier fear had transformed into cold fury. "We're prepared to discuss terms," Phillips announced. Victoria outlined their demands. Lucas would retain the family home and primary custody of both children during divorce proceedings. Melissa would move out immediately. The trust fund would be frozen pending final settlement, and a temporary gag order would prevent either party from discussing the case with anyone outside their legal counsel. "This is extortion," Melissa hissed, finally meeting Lucas's eyes. "You're using our children as pawns." "That's an interesting accusation," Lucas responded, his voice calm, "coming from the woman who coached our son to tell me not to come home for Christmas." "You weren't coming home for us," Melissa shot back. "You were coming home because your deployment ended. There's a difference, and that difference justifies what you did. 16 years, Lucas. 16 years of raising our children alone while you played hero in foreign countries. Of never knowing if you were dead or alive. Of restarting our lives every time you got transferred. What did you expect? Honesty," Lucas said simply. "If you wanted out, you could have said so. Instead, you lied. You stole. You turned our son against me. I protected our son from more disappointment." Melissa's voice cracked. "From more empty promises and missed birthdays." Lucas leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen, Melissa. You're going to sign these papers. You're going to move out of our house. And then you're going to tell Aiden the truth about why I stayed away when I was supposed to come home for Christmas. And if I refuse?" Lucas nodded to Victoria, who produced another folder. "Then these documents go to the FBI, the Colorado Medical Board, and the press." Phillips placed a restraining hand on Melissa's arm again. "My client will sign the temporary agreement. One condition," Melissa said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Nathaniel isn't mentioned in any of this. Leave him out of it." Lucas exchanged a glance with Victoria, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Agreed," Lucas said. "For now." As Melissa signed the documents, Lucas felt no triumph, no vindication. Just the weight of what came next, rebuilding his relationship with his children, particularly Aiden, while navigating the wreckage of his marriage. His phone vibrated with a text from Dominic. "Subject 2 just booked a third ticket to Cancun. Child's fare." Lucas's blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to flee, they were planning to take one of his children with them. And given Aiden's animosity toward him, it wasn't hard to guess which child. He showed the message to Victoria, whose expression hardened. "Sign here, Mr. Davenport," she said, indicating the final page. "We have additional matters to address immediately." As they left the conference room, Victoria whispered, "My office." Now, once inside her private office with the door closed, Victoria's professional calm gave way to urgent efficiency. "If they're planning to take your son out of the country against a custody order, we need an emergency hearing," she said, already dialing her assistant. "Judge Watkins owes me a favor. We can get before him this afternoon." "We need more than a hearing," Lucas said. "We need surveillance on both Melissa and Wilcox. And we need to secure Aiden." "Mr. Davenport, whatever you're thinking, they won't just abduct my son in broad daylight," Lucas interrupted. "They'll wait until the last possible moment, probably the night before their flight. We need to be ready." Victoria studied him. "You've thought this through. I plan for contingencies, Ms. Reeves. It's what kept me alive all these years." She nodded slowly. "I'll get the emergency order. You focus on keeping track of your son." Lucas was already texting Dominic. "Need eyes on subject 3 immediately. School, home, all movements." The response came quickly. "On it." "What about subject 1? Lucas considered his options. Melissa was angry but constrained by the agreement she'd just signed. Dr. Wilcox, however, had no such constraints. "Priority on 2 and 3, he replied. "1 is neutralized for now." What Lucas didn't share with either Victoria or Dominic was the final phase of his plan, the one that would ensure Melissa and Nathaniel never threatened his family again. For that, he needed different allies. As he left Victoria's office, Lucas made a call to a number few people possessed, the direct line to Colonel Peters' secure phone. "It's Davenport," he said when the colonel answered. "I need to activate contingency, Delta." There was a pause. "That's extreme, Lucas. Are you sure?" They're planning to take my son out of the country, sir. So yes, I'm sure. Understood. I'll make the calls. Delta will be active within the hour. Lucas ended the call and checked his watch. 18 hours until the endgame began. Chapter 6. The Precipice. The emergency hearing before Judge Watkins lasted less than 30 minutes. With evidence of the planned flight to Cancun and the newly signed custody agreement, the judge had no difficulty issuing an emergency order prohibiting either child from leaving the country and restricting their travel beyond Colorado without Lucas's written permission. Armed with the court order, Lucas drove to Riverdale High School. The final bell had just rung, and students were streaming toward buses and waiting cars. He spotted Aiden immediately, taller than when Lucas had last seen him, with the same dark hair and strong jawline that Lucas saw in the mirror every morning. Lucas approached slowly, giving his son time to notice him. When Aiden looked up and saw him, the boy froze, his expression cycling through shock, anger, and confusion. "What are you doing here?" Aiden demanded when Lucas reached him. "I need to talk to you," Lucas said quietly. "I have nothing to say to you." Aiden turned away. Lucas placed a gentle but firm hand on his shoulder. "This isn't optional, Aiden. We're going to talk. Now, Mom said you can't force me to go with you. Your mother doesn't make those decisions anymore," Lucas said, showing Aiden the court order. "As of 2 hours ago, I have primary custody of both you and your sister during the divorce proceedings." "Divorce?" Aiden's voice cracked. "So you're really leaving us?" The accusation, so backward, so twisted from reality, struck Lucas like a physical blow. "Is that what she told you? That I'm leaving?" Aiden looked away. "She said you were never really here anyway." "Let's go somewhere we can talk privately," Lucas suggested, gesturing to his car. After a moment's hesitation, Aiden followed. They drove in silence to a nearby park, found an empty bench, and sat side by side, watching kids play on a distant playground. "Do you know why I didn't come home for Christmas?" Lucas finally asked. Aiden stared at his hands. "Because I told you not to." "And why did you send that text?" Silence. "Aiden, I need you to be honest with me," Lucas pressed. "Was that message your idea, or did someone suggest it?" "Mom said." Aiden swallowed. "Mom said you were only coming home because you had to, that you didn't really want to be with us, that we'd all be happier if you just stayed away." Lucas took a deep breath, controlling his anger. "And you believed her? What was I supposed to believe?" Aiden's voice rose. "You've been gone for 4 years, Dad. 4 years. You missed everything. My basketball championships, my first girlfriend, Nora's middle school graduation. Everything." "I know," Lucas acknowledged. "And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I was serving our country, Aiden. I wasn't absent by choice. You could have transferred to a stateside post. Other military parents do it." "Yes, I could have," Lucas admitted. "And I was trying to arrange exactly that. My final deployment was supposed to be my last overseas tour. I was planning to request a training position at Fort Carson so I could be home every night." Aiden looked skeptical. "Really?" Lucas pulled out his phone and showed Aiden an email exchange with his commanding officer, dated 3 months earlier, discussing the transfer request. "I want to surprise you all at Christmas," Lucas explained. "A permanent homecoming, not just another leave." Aiden's shoulders slumped. "Mom never said anything about that." "I imagine there are a lot of things your mother hasn't told you," Lucas said carefully. "Like her relationship with Dr. Wilcox." Aiden's head snapped up. "What about Dr. Nate? How long have you known about them, Aiden?" "A few months," Aiden admitted. "Mom said they fell in love while you were gone. That sometimes these things happen." "And the trip to Cancun next week? Did she tell you about that?" Aiden's confused expression answered the question. "Your mother and Dr. Wilcox purchased 3 tickets to Mexico," Lucas explained. "For them and you. One-way tickets." "That's not." Aiden stopped, uncertainty clouding his features. "She wouldn't just take me away without telling me. She was planning to tell you at the last minute," Lucas said gently. "Probably with some story about how I'd agreed to it, or how it was just a vacation." "How do you know that?" "Because I've seen the evidence, Aiden. The ticket purchases. The rental property they secured in Cancun. The Mexican school they contacted about enrollment." Aiden looked devastated. "Why would she do that?" Because she and Dr. Wilcox have been misappropriating money from the trust fund your great-grandfather set up for your college education, Lucas explained. They were about to be caught, so they planned to run. I don't believe you, Aiden said, but his voice lacked conviction. Lucas handed him a folder containing printouts of the evidence, carefully selected to prove his claims without revealing the full extent of Melissa and Nathaniel's crimes. As Aiden read through the documents, his expression hardened. She lied to me. Yes, Lucas confirmed. She did. And that text she had me send you was part of her plan to keep me away until they could finalize their escape. Aiden closed the folder, his hands trembling slightly. What happens now? Now I take you home, Lucas said. To our home. Your mother will be moving out tonight, per the court order. And Dr. Nate? He won't be welcome in our home anymore. Aiden nodded slowly. What about Nora? She'll be with us too. Does she know about all this? Lucas hesitated. She knows some of it. She never believed the lies about me. That brought a flash of shame to Aiden's eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. For the text. For believing Mom. You're 16, Aiden. You trusted your mother, as you should have been able to. Lucas placed a hand on his son's shoulder. The blame isn't on you. As they drove home, Lucas's phone buzzed with updates from Dominic. Melissa had been observed packing suitcases. Dr. Wilcox had withdrawn another $50,000 in cash. They were accelerating their plans, despite the court order. Lucas texted back, maintain surveillance. Alert me to any approach to either child or the airport. Then he called Colonel Peters. Delta is in position, the colonel confirmed. Just give the word. Not yet, Lucas replied. Let them make the first move. When they arrived home, Nora was waiting on the porch. She ran to embrace both of them, her relief palpable when she saw Aiden with their father. You fixed it, she said to Lucas. Not yet, Lucas corrected, but I'm working on it. Inside, the house showed signs of hasty packing. Empty spaces on shelves, gaps in the closets visible through the master bedroom's open door. Melissa had clearly taken what she could grab quickly. Lucas gathered his children in the living room. I know this is all happening very fast, he began, and there's a lot I haven't told you yet about what's been going on between your mother and me. Is it true she stole our college money? Aiden asked bluntly. Nora gasped. What? Not all of it, Lucas clarified. I managed to secure most of the trust before any permanent damage was done. But yes, she and Dr. Wilcox were accessing funds they shouldn't have been. For the house in Aspen, Nora said quietly. Both Lucas and Aiden turned to her in surprise. I heard them talking about it, she explained, about how they'd have weekend getaways in the mountains while we were at school or with friends. The casual cruelty of that plan, excluding the children from their stolen luxury, reignited Lucas's cold fury. But he kept his expression neutral for his children's sake. The important thing now is that we're together, he told them. And I promise you both, I'm not leaving again. My active service days are over. As they prepared dinner together, a simple meal of pasta and salad, the first they'd shared as a family in years, Lucas maintained a careful vigilance. He knew Melissa wouldn't accept defeat easily. The court order, the exposure of her plans, the loss of her children, these were setbacks, not surrender. His phone vibrated with a text from Dominic. Subjects 1 and 2 meeting at hotel near airport. Surveillance in place. Perfect. Everything was proceeding according to plan. After dinner, as Aiden and Nora settled in to watch a movie, Lucas excused himself to make a call from his study. He couldn't afford to have his children overhear this conversation. Colonel, he said when Peters answered. Initiate Delta. Phase 1 only. Understood, the colonel replied. Timeline, 20 minutes. Lucas ended the call and rejoined his children, his expression betraying nothing of what was about to unfold. Exactly 19 minutes later, his phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown. Excuse me, he told Aiden and Nora. I need to take this. In the privacy of the kitchen, he answered. Davenport. Sir, this is Agent Reynolds, DEA. We've executed the warrant at the location you identified through your military intelligence channels. I'm calling to inform you that we've detained 2 individuals found in possession of significant quantities of controlled substances, including oxycodone and fentanyl, without prescription authorization. I see, Lucas said. And their identities? A Dr. Nathaniel Wilcox and a woman identified as Melissa Davenport. She claims to be your wife, sir. She is, Lucas confirmed. For now, given your position with military intelligence and your role in providing this information, we wanted to confirm how you'd like us to proceed. Process them according to standard protocols, Agent Reynolds. No special treatment. Understood, sir. We'll keep you updated as the case progresses. Lucas ended the call and leaned against the counter, closing his eyes briefly. Phase 1 complete. His wife and her lover were now in federal custody, facing charges that would keep them occupied for quite some time. Charges based on evidence that had been carefully, legally obtained through proper channels. The prescription fraud they'd been committing for months had finally caught up with them. The fact that the investigation had been expedited through Lucas's military connections was merely a matter of fortunate timing. He composed his features and returned to the living room. "Everything okay, Dad?" Nora asked, noticing his expression. "Yes," Lucas assured her. "Everything is exactly as it should be." Chapter 7, The Fallout. The morning headlines were sensational. Prominent surgeon and nurse arrested in prescription drug scheme. Lucas watched his children's reactions as they read the news on their phones over breakfast. Aiden looked stunned. "Mom was arrested?" "Last night," Lucas confirmed. The DEA had been investigating Dr. Wilcox for prescription fraud for some time. "Your mother was implicated. Will she go to jail?" Nora asked, her voice small. "That depends on many factors," Lucas said carefully. "The evidence against them is substantial, but first-time offenders sometimes receive reduced sentences." "Did you know this was going to happen?" Aiden asked, studying his father with newfound perception. "I knew there was an investigation," Lucas acknowledged. "I didn't know when they would make arrests." This wasn't technically a lie. Lucas had indeed known about the DEA's interest in Dr. Wilcox's prescription practices, information he'd obtained legally through his military connections. The timing of the arrests, however, had been accelerated through those same connections. "Can we see her?" Nora asked. "She'll have an arraignment hearing today," Lucas explained. "After that, if she's granted bail, you can see her. And if she's not," Aiden pressed, "then visits would be arranged through the detention facility." Lucas observed his son's troubled expression. "Aiden, I know this is difficult, but your mother made choices that had consequences. This isn't my doing." Another technical truth. Lucas hadn't fabricated evidence or filed false reports. He had simply ensured that legitimate investigations weren't delayed by bureaucracy or overlooked due to Dr. Wilcox's prominent position. "What about our holiday?" Nora asked suddenly. "We were supposed to leave for Cancun next week." Lucas and Aiden exchanged a glance. "There's been a change of plans," Lucas said gently. "That trip wasn't what you were told it was," as he explained the true nature of the planned vacation. A permanent relocation designed to evade financial and legal accountability. Lucas watched understanding dawn in Nora's eyes. "They were going to take Aiden and leave me behind?" Her voice cracked with hurt. "The third ticket was in Aiden's name," Lucas confirmed, "but I can't say for certain what their long-term plans were for you." Tears welled in Nora's eyes. "Mom was going to abandon me." "Hey." Lucas moved to kneel beside her chair. "No one is abandoning you. I'm here. I'm staying. And we're going to get through this together, all three of us." Aiden, in a gesture that surprised Lucas, reached across the table to take his sister's hand. "Dad's right. We stick together now." The moment was interrupted by Lucas's phone. Victoria Reeves's name flashed on the screen. "I need to take this," he said, stepping into the next room. "Yes, Victoria?" "The arraignment is scheduled for 2 p.m., she reported. "Judge Harmon's courtroom. Given the nature of the charges and the flight risk, documented by those one-way tickets, the prosecutor is pushing for remand without bail." "Good," Lucas said. "There's more," Victoria continued. "Dr. Wilcox is turning on your wife. His attorney has already approached the DA about a deal. He testifies that Melissa was the mastermind behind both the prescription fraud and the misappropriation of trust funds, and he gets reduced charges." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Is the DA considering it?" "They're listening. Wilcox has considerable influence in this community. But with the evidence we've provided about the trust fund, evidence that clearly shows Wilcox was the primary beneficiary. His story has significant holes. I want to be at the arraignment, Lucas decided. Are you sure that's wise? The press will be there. Let them come, Lucas said firmly. I have nothing to hide. After ending the call, Lucas returned to the kitchen to find his children in serious conversation, which abruptly stopped when he entered. The arraignment is this afternoon, he told them. I'll be attending. We want to come too, Aiden said, exchanging a glance with Nora, who nodded in agreement. Lucas considered his options. Shielding them from his ugliness was his instinct, but they'd already been exposed to so much. Perhaps witnessing the consequences of their mother's actions would provide a necessary, if painful, clarity. All right, he conceded, but you need to understand, this won't be easy to watch. We know, Nora said softly, but we need to see her. Lucas nodded. Get ready. We leave in an hour. While his children prepared, Lucas made another call, this one to Dominic. Progress report, he requested. Bank records confirmed Dr. Wilcox transferred $1.2 million to an offshore account in the Caymans last month, Dominic reported. And get this, Melissa's signature is on the wire transfer authorization. They weren't just stealing from the trust fund. They were setting up their escape long before you came home. Can we trace the money? Already done. I forwarded the details to Victoria. With this evidence, Wilcox's attempt to paint Melissa as the mastermind falls apart. They were equal partners in this scheme. Good work, Lucas said. Keep digging. I want to know everything. There's one more thing, Dominic added. Your home equity line of credit. Melissa maxed it out 2 weeks ago. $300,000 transferred directly to Wilcox's personal account. Lucas closed his eyes briefly. Another betrayal. Another theft. Thank you, he said finally. I'll see you at the courthouse. The Denver County Courthouse buzzed with activity as Lucas and his children arrived. Press cameras flashed, and reporters shouted questions that Lucas ignored as he guided Aiden and Nora through the security checkpoint and into the building. Victoria met them in a hallway outside courtroom 3B. They're bringing the defendants up now. Are you prepared for this? We are, Lucas assured her, though he noted Nora's pale face and Aiden's clenched jaw. Remember, Victoria cautioned the children, no matter what happens in there, no outbursts. The judge won't tolerate disruptions. They nodded solemnly and followed her into the courtroom, taking seats in the second row. Lucas positioned himself between his children, a physical barrier against what was to come. The side door opened, and bailiffs led in Melissa and Dr. Wilcox, both wearing orange jumpsuits, their hands cuffed in front of them. Melissa's red-rimmed eyes scanned the courtroom frantically until they locked on Lucas and the children. Her expression crumpled. Mom, Nora whispered, half rising. Lucas placed a gentle hand on her arm, and she sank back in her seat. The proceedings moved quickly. The charges were read: conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, illegal distribution of controlled substances, wire fraud, misappropriation of fiduciary funds, and, most seriously, attempted parental kidnapping. When bail was discussed, the prosecutor was unequivocal. Your Honor, these defendants purchased one-way tickets to Mexico and were preparing to flee with a minor child of Ms. Davenport and her estranged husband. They represent the definition of flight risks. Dr. Wilcox's attorney argued for bail based on his client's standing in the community and lack of prior criminal record. Melissa's court-appointed lawyer, Graham Phillips, having withdrawn from the case after her arrest, made similar arguments. Judge Harmon was unmoved. Bail is denied for both defendants. They will be remanded to custody pending trial. As the bailiffs prepare to lead them out, Melissa turned toward Lucas and the children. Aiden, Nora, please tell them this is a mistake. Your father is doing this to punish me. Aiden stared straight ahead, his expression hard. Nora buried her face against Lucas's shoulder. Defendants will refrain from addressing the gallery, Judge Harmon warned. As Melissa was led away, her eyes met Lucas's one final time. The hatred he saw there confirmed what he already knew. She would never forgive him for this, just as he would never forgive her for what she'd done to their family. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around them. Victoria expertly deflected most questions, but one reporter managed to address Lucas directly. "Mr. Davenport, how does it feel to see your wife facing such serious charges?" Lucas considered his response carefully, aware of his children listening. "Justice is never a cause for celebration," he said finally. "But the truth needed to come to light for my children's sake." In the car driving home, Aiden broke the heavy silence. "Dad, was all of this necessary? Couldn't you have just divorced Mom without the arrests and everything?" Lucas glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. "Aiden, what your mother and Dr. Wilcox were planning wasn't just morally wrong. It was criminal. They were going to take you out of the country against court orders. They stole from your trust fund. They committed fraud. These aren't accusations. They're documented facts." "But still," Nora interjected, "it's Mom. She raised us while you were gone." The implied accusation stung, but Lucas acknowledged its validity. "You're right, Nora, and I'll always be grateful to her for that. But being a good mother for many years doesn't excuse criminal behavior later." "What happens to us now?" Aiden asked. "We rebuild," Lucas said simply. "One day at a time." That evening, as his children retreated to their rooms to process the day's events, Lucas sat in his study reviewing the latest updates from Victoria and Dominic. The case against Melissa and Nathaniel was solidifying. With the offshore accounts uncovered and the trust fund misappropriation documented, they were looking at potential sentences of 10 to 15 years. Lucas felt no triumph, no vindication. Only a hollowness where his life with Melissa had once been. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over, Lucas. You've destroyed everything I built. I'll never forgive you for this. M." Somehow, despite everything, Melissa had found a way to contact him. Lucas saved the message as evidence of her continued hostility, but didn't respond. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Instead, he opened his laptop and began researching family therapists in the Denver area. His children would need professional support to navigate the trauma of their mother's betrayal and arrest. And though he would never admit it aloud, perhaps he needed it too. The road ahead would be difficult, but Lucas had never shied away from difficult missions. This one, rebuilding his family from the ashes of betrayal, would be his most important yet. Chapter 8. The Reconstruction. 6 weeks after Melissa's arrest, the Davenport household had established a new normal. Lucas had taken a position as a tactical consultant with a private security firm in Denver, allowing him to work regular hours and be home for dinner every night, a simple pleasure he'd missed during his years of deployment. Aiden's initial anger had gradually softened as he participated in weekly therapy sessions and came to terms with the reality of his mother's actions. Nora, though still quietly grieving the loss of her mother's presence, had shown remarkable resilience, throwing herself into school activities and spending more time with Lucas. On this particular evening, as they cleared the dinner dishes together, Lucas noticed Aiden's thoughtful expression. "Something on your mind?" he asked his son. Aiden hesitated. "Mom's preliminary hearing is next week." "Yes," Lucas acknowledged. "Victoria called this morning with the details." "Are you going?" "I haven't decided." Lucas studied his son. "Are you thinking about attending?" Aiden shrugged, attempting casualness. "Maybe. I haven't seen her since the arraignment." "You could visit her at the detention center," Lucas suggested. "I've told you before. I won't stand in the way of your relationship with your mother." "I know." Aiden placed a plate in the dishwasher with unnecessary care. "But seeing her in that place, it's hard." "Of course it is," Lucas agreed. "And no one would blame you for keeping your distance until you're ready." "What about you?" Aiden looked up. "Are you ever going to forgive her?" The question was direct, characteristic of the increased honesty in their relationship. Lucas considered his response carefully. "No," he said finally. "What your mother did wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a calculated plan to steal your future and separate you from me permanently. Some actions cross lines that can't be uncrossed." Aiden nodded slowly. "That's what I thought you'd say. Does that bother you?" "No," Aiden said, surprising Lucas. "Actually, it makes me feel safer somehow, knowing you have boundaries that can't be violated." Lucas placed a hand on his son's shoulder, struck by the maturity in his assessment. At 16, Aiden was navigating moral complexities that many adults struggled with. Dr. Levine says holding on to anger hurts me more than mom. Aiden continued, referencing his therapist. But I don't know how to let it go. Forgiveness is a personal journey, Lucas said. Don't rush it and don't fake it. Whatever you feel, anger, sadness, confusion, it's valid. Their conversation was interrupted by Nora bounding into the kitchen, holding her phone triumphantly. Dad, Coach Williams just texted. I made the varsity soccer team. Lucas grinned, embracing his daughter. That's fantastic, Nora. When's your first game? As Nora excitedly detailed the upcoming season schedule, Lucas caught Aiden's eye over her shoulder. His son offered a small smile, an acknowledgement of their interrupted conversation and an acceptance of its conclusion. Later that night, after both children had gone to bed, Lucas sat in his study reviewing documents Victoria had sent regarding the case. Melissa's defense team was pushing for a plea deal, hoping to reduce her potential sentence by testifying against Dr. Wilcox. The prosecutor wanted Lucas's input before proceeding. It was a position of power he hadn't sought but now held, the ability to influence his ex-wife's future. The vindictive path would be to oppose any deal to ensure she served the maximum sentence possible. But Lucas had never been motivated by vengeance, only by protection. His phone rang. Colonel Peters. Thought you'd want to know. The colonel said without preamble. The DEA task force found 3 more hospitals where Wilcox was running his prescription scam. This goes way beyond your wife, Lucas. He's been doing this for years. With different accomplices? Lucas asked. Looks that way. They've identified 2 other nurses who participated. Both claim they were coerced, threatened with termination if they didn't cooperate. Was Melissa coerced? No evidence of that, Peters replied. All indications point to her as a willing participant. The money trail is particularly damning. Her signature on those offshore transfers can't be explained away. Lucas absorbed this information silently. What are you thinking? Peters pressed. I'm thinking my children have suffered enough, Lucas said finally. If Melissa accepts responsibility for her actions and testifies truthfully against Wilcox, I won't oppose a reduced sentence. That's surprisingly merciful, given what she did. It's not mercy, Lucas corrected. It's pragmatism. My children need closure, not a prolonged legal battle. And I need to focus on rebuilding their trust, not pursuing retribution against their mother. After ending the call, Lucas drafted an email to Victoria outlining his position. He would not actively advocate for leniency, but neither would he stand in the way if Melissa demonstrated genuine remorse and cooperation. As he prepared to send the email, a text message arrived from Dominic. New development. Wilcox's ex-wife contacted me. Says she has information you need to hear. Meeting arranged for tomorrow, 10 a.m., usual place. Lucas's interest was piqued. Catherine Wilcox had divorced Nathaniel 8 years earlier after a bitter public battle that had made local headlines. What information could she possibly have that would be relevant now? The following morning, after dropping his children at school, Lucas arrived at the small coffee shop where he occasionally met Dominic for updates. Catherine Wilcox was already there, an elegant woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and sharp eyes that assessed Lucas as he approached. Mrs. Wilcox, he greeted her, extending his hand. Thank you for meeting me. It's Ms. Monroe now, she corrected, accepting his handshake. I reverted to my maiden name after the divorce. And thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Lucas sat across from her. Dominic mentioned you have information. Yes. Catherine, or rather, Ms. Monroe, opened her handbag and removed a flash drive. 12 years of financial records Nathaniel thought I didn't keep. Offshore accounts, shell companies, property purchases under assumed names. A complete roadmap of his financial crimes. Lucas stared at the flash drive. Why give this to me now? Why not take it to the authorities years ago? Our divorce settlement included a non-disclosure agreement, she explained. I received a substantial payment in exchange for my silence. But that agreement had a clause. If Nathaniel was ever charged with a felony, the NDA would be void. And now he has been, Lucas observed. Exactly. A small, Satisfied smile curved her lips. I've been waiting 8 years for this moment, Mr. Davenport. 8 years watching him move on to new victims while I remain bound by legal constraints. Victims, Lucas repeated. Catherine's expression hardened. Your wife isn't the first woman Nathaniel has manipulated into criminal activity. There was a pharmaceutical rep before her, a hospital administrator before that, and me at the beginning. His pattern is consistent. Find a woman with access to something he wants, charm her, involve her in his schemes, then discard her when she becomes a liability. And you have evidence of all this? She tapped the flash drive. Everything, including recorded conversations in which he discusses his methodology quite explicitly. Lucas took the flash drive, turning it over in his fingers. Why bring this to me instead of the prosecutor? Because the prosecutor is only concerned with the current charges, Catherine explained. You, however, have a different motivation. You want to protect your children from ever being manipulated by Nathaniel again. This evidence ensures he'll never be in a position to harm anyone in your family. Lucas studied her. You've done your research on me. Thoroughly, she acknowledged. I know about your military career, your intelligence background, your reputation for strategic thinking. I know you're not motivated by revenge, but by security. And I know that, unlike me, you won't be silenced by an NDA or intimidated by threats. What do you want in return? Lucas asked directly. Nothing, Catherine replied. Consider it a gift from one of Nathaniel's victims to another. Or rather, to your wife, who, despite her willing participation, was still playing a role in his script. Lucas pocketed the flash drive. I'll have this information verified and then forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Naturally, Catherine agreed. Due diligence is important, but you'll find everything is meticulously documented. I was an accountant before I married Nathaniel. Record keeping is second nature to me. As they parted ways, Catherine offered one final observation. You know, Mr. Davenport, there's a certain satisfaction in watching someone who believes themselves untouchable finally face consequences. I imagine you understand that feeling. I do, Lucas acknowledged. But it's a hollow satisfaction. Perhaps, she conceded. But it's better than the alternative, watching them continue to destroy lives without consequences. Lucas couldn't argue with that assessment. The evidence Catherine provided proved transformative in both cases. Over the next 2 weeks, faced with the overwhelming documentation of his past crimes, Dr. Wilcox accepted a plea deal that would keep him in prison for 20 years. As part of the agreement, he admitted that Melissa had joined his operation only in the past 2 years, not as its architect, but as a participant. This clarification, combined with Melissa's full cooperation, resulted in a reduced sentence for her, 8 years, with the possibility of parole after 5. Still a substantial punishment, but not the decade-plus she had been facing. When Victoria called with the news, Lucas received it without comment. This is the best outcome we could have hoped for, Victoria assured him. Wilcox will be incarcerated well into his 60s. His medical license is permanently revoked, and Melissa's sentence, while significant, allows for the possibility that she might repair her relationship with your children while they're still relatively young. If they want that relationship, Lucas noted. Of course, Victoria agreed. That will be entirely their choice. But the opportunity will exist, which I think is important for their long-term emotional health. After ending the call, Lucas found himself on the back porch, staring at the mountains in the distance. The legal battles were concluding. The immediate threats were neutralized. Now came a harder part, helping his children heal from wounds that no court could address. Nora joined him, wrapped in a sweater against the evening chill. Is it over? She asked simply. The legal part is mostly over, Lucas confirmed. Your mother accepted a plea deal today. 8 years, possibly less with good behavior. Nora absorbed this silently, then said, she wants us to visit. She's been writing letters. I know, Lucas acknowledged. Have you decided if you want to see her? Not yet. Nora leaned against the porch railing. Part of me misses her. Another part is so angry I can barely breathe sometimes. Is that normal? Completely normal, Lucas assured her. There's no right way to feel about this, Nora. Whatever you're experiencing is valid. What about you? She asked, echoing Aiden's earlier question. How do you feel? Lucas considered his answer carefully. I feel determined, he said finally. Determined to be here for you and your brother. Determined to rebuild what was broken. Determined to ensure nothing like this ever threatens our family again. Nora studied him. You don't hate her? Hate requires emotional investment, Lucas explained. And I've chosen to invest my emotions elsewhere. In you, in Aiden, in our future together. His daughter nodded slowly, seeming to understand. That's kind of how I want to feel too. Like mom just doesn't matter anymore. Not in a mean way, but in a moving on way. That's a healthy perspective, Lucas told her. And it's okay if you're not there yet. Healing takes time. As they stood together watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, Lucas felt a quiet certainty that they would be all right. Not immediately, not perfectly, but eventually and authentically. The family they rebuilt might look different from what they'd had before, but it would be stronger, more honest, and ultimately more resilient. That night, after Nora and Aiden had gone to bed, Lucas sat at his desk and composed a letter, not to Melissa, but to his children. A letter they wouldn't receive until years later, when they were adults and could fully understand the choices he'd made on their behalf. My dear Aiden and Nora, by the time you read this, the events of 2023 will be distant memories, but their impact on our family will have shaped who we've all become. I want you to know that every decision I made during that difficult time was guided by a single purpose, protecting your future. Your mother made choices I could not forgive. Not because I lack compassion, but because forgiveness would have signaled that such betrayals were acceptable. They were not. They never will be. Some might call my response to her actions harsh or unforgiving. Perhaps it was. But in life, we must establish boundaries that cannot be crossed without consequences. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is respect for ourselves and for the trust others place in us. I hope that, as adults, you've found your own balance between compassion and self-protection. I hope you've learned to forgive when it served your heart, but to stand firm when forgiveness would only invite further harm. Most of all, I hope you know how deeply you are loved, not just by me, but by all who have the privilege of knowing the remarkable people you've become. With enduring love, Dad. Lucas sealed the letter and placed it in a fireproof safe along with other important documents. Then he turned out the lights and prepared for bed, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. Chapter 9. The Resolution. 2 years after Melissa's sentencing, Lucas stood in the crowded gymnasium of Riverdale High School, applauding as Aiden crossed the stage to receive his diploma. Now 18, his son had grown into a young man of remarkable character, thoughtful, resilient, and fiercely loyal to those who earned his trust. Beside Lucas, 16-year-old Nora cheered loudly for her brother, her face alight with pride. She had blossomed in her own right, excelling both academically and athletically, recently named captain of the varsity soccer team. As Aiden rejoined them after the ceremony, Lucas embraced him tightly. Congratulations, son. I couldn't be prouder. Thanks, Dad. Aiden's smile was genuine, a stark contrast to the angry, confused teenager he'd been 2 years earlier. We should get moving if we're going to make our dinner reservation, Nora reminded them, already heading toward the exit. The celebration at Aiden's favorite restaurant was perfect. Good food, easy conversation, and the comfortable rhythm of a family that had found its balance. When Aiden opened Lucas's gift, a vintage military compass that had belonged to Lucas's grandfather, his eyes widened in recognition. You always said this was your most treasured possession, he said, turning the brass instrument in his hands. It was, Lucas confirmed. Now it's yours. A reminder that even when the path forward isn't clear, you have the tools to find your way. Later that evening, after Nora had gone to bed, Aiden lingered in the living room with Lucas, something clearly weighing on his mind. Everything okay? Lucas asked. Aiden hesitated, then said, I got a letter from Mom last week. She's up for her first parole hearing next month. Lucas nodded. He'd received formal notification as the victim of record. How do you feel about that? Conflicted, Aiden admitted. Part of me thinks she's served enough time. Another part, he trailed off, isn't ready to have her back in your life. Lucas finished for him. Yeah. Aiden looked relieved at the understanding. Is that terrible? Not at all, Lucas assured him. Your feelings are valid, Aiden. And whatever you decide, whether to reconnect with your mother or maintain distance, I'll support you. What about you? Aiden asked. Will you oppose her parole? Lucas had given this considerable thought. No, he said finally. I won't actively oppose it, but neither will I advocate for it. The parole board will make their decision based on her behavior and rehabilitation, not my input. Aiden nodded slowly. That seems fair. The important thing, Lucas continued, is that regardless of their decision, our family remains solid. Your mother's potential release doesn't change who we are or what we've built together. The following week brought unexpected news, not about Melissa, but about Dr. Wilcox. He had been killed in a prison altercation, allegedly after information about his crimes against children through prescription fraud had circulated among inmates. The man who had nearly destroyed the Davenport family was gone. Lucas received the news with complex emotions. As a soldier, he had taken lives in combat, but never derived satisfaction from death. Yet he couldn't deny the sense of closure that came with knowing Nathaniel Wilcox would never again threaten his family or manipulate others. He shared the news with his children carefully, emphasizing that while they might feel various emotions about Wilcox's death, celebrating it would be inappropriate. I don't feel happy about it, Nora said thoughtfully, but I don't feel sad either. Is that wrong? No, Lucas assured her. It's a measured response to someone who caused significant harm. Do you think it will affect Mom's parole hearing? Aiden asked. Possibly, Lucas acknowledged. Without Wilcox's influence, the board might view her as less likely to reoffend. The prediction proved accurate. 1 month later, Melissa was granted parole with strict conditions, regular check-ins with a parole officer, mandatory counseling, and various restrictions on her movement and employment. She would be released in 2 weeks. The news arrived as the Davenports were preparing for another milestone, Aiden's departure for college. He had been accepted to the United States Naval Academy, a choice that had initially surprised Lucas, but one he fully supported. Will you be okay with Mom out while I'm gone? Aiden asked as they packed his belongings. I mean, with just you and Nora here? The concern in his son's voice touched Lucas deeply. We'll be fine, Aiden. Your mother has no legal right to approach either of you without permission, and she knows better than to test those boundaries with me. Still, Aiden persisted, if she tries anything. She won't, Lucas said firmly. But if she does, I'm more than capable of handling it. Focus on your education and training. That's your mission now. The day Melissa was released coincided with Aiden's departure for Annapolis. Whether this timing was deliberately engineered by Melissa's legal team or merely coincidental, Lucas couldn't say. But he appreciated that it spared Aiden an immediate decision about whether to see his mother. Nora, however, faced that choice directly. Melissa had sent a letter requesting a meeting, a careful, tentative invitation that acknowledged Nora's right to refuse. What should I do, Dad? Nora asked, showing him the letter. Lucas handed it back without comment. That's entirely your decision, Nora. I won't influence you either way. She studied him. But you still won't see her. No, Lucas confirmed. My position hasn't changed. Because you don't believe she's really sorry? Because some breaches of trust can't be repaired, Lucas explained. Your relationship with your mother is different from mine. You should make your own choice based on what feels right for you. After several days of consideration, Nora decided to meet Melissa at a neutral location, a public park with Lucas waiting at a discreet distance. The reunion was brief, and from what Nora later shared, awkward but not hostile. She's different, Nora observed that evening. Quieter. Less. I don't know, polished. Prison changes people, Lucas said neutrally. She asked about you, Nora continued. Want to know if you were dating anyone. What did you tell her? The truth. That you've had a few dates, but nothing serious. Nora grinned. Though I think Ms. Rivera from my math department is hoping to change that. Lucas smiled but didn't take the bait. His few ventures into dating had been cautious and private. Creating stability for his children had been his priority, not rebuilding his romantic life. Mom also asked if she could come to my games sometimes. Nora continued, her expression growing serious. I said I'd think about it. And will you? Lucas asked. Maybe. Eventually. Nora shrugged. I'm not ready to have her that involved yet. But I might be someday. That's a healthy approach, Lucas approved. Take your time. Set your boundaries. Life settled into a new rhythm. Aiden thrived at the Naval Academy, calling weekly with updates. Nora maintained cautious, limited contact with Melissa, occasional meetings, always in public places, always on Nora's terms. Lucas focused on his work and his relationship with his daughter, creating a home environment where she continued to flourish. Then, 6 months after Melissa's release, Lucas received an unexpected visitor at his office. Graham Phillips, Melissa's original divorce attorney, requested a private meeting. Mr. Davenport, Phillips began once they were seated in Lucas's office. I represent a client who wishes to purchase your property in Aspen. Lucas raised an eyebrow. I don't own property in Aspen. Not directly, Phillips acknowledged. It's held in a trust established by your grandfather. The same trust your ex-wife and Dr. Wilcox attempted to misappropriate. I'm aware of the trust, Lucas said carefully. But it doesn't own Aspen property. Phillips smiled thinly. Actually it does. When the authorities investigated the misappropriation, they discovered that while your wife and Dr. Wilcox had diverted funds, those funds were ultimately used to purchase legitimate assets. The court restored those assets to the trust. This was news to Lucas. He'd been so focused on the criminal proceedings and his children's well-being that he'd left the financial restoration details to the forensic accountants. So there's a property in Aspen that legally belongs to my children's trust fund, Lucas summarized. And your client wants to buy it. Yes, Phillips confirmed. For substantially more than market value. Why? The property has sentimental significance to my client. Understanding dawned. Your client is Melissa. Phillips didn't confirm or deny. The offer is $7.2 million. The property was purchased for $5 million using diverted funds. Lucas leaned back, considering. The trust was established for his children's education and future security. A premium of over $2 million would significantly enhance that security. I'll need to consult with the trustee, Lucas said finally. Of course, Phillips agreed, sliding a business card across the desk. Please have them contact me directly with any questions. After Phillips left, Lucas called Victoria Reeves, who confirmed the property's existence and its legal status. The prosecution kept it quiet during the criminal proceedings, she explained. They were focused on establishing guilt, not asset recovery. But yes, the Aspen property was purchased with trust funds and has been legally restored to the trust. And the offer is legitimate. $7.2 million is well above market value, Victoria confirmed. From a purely financial perspective, it's an excellent deal for your children's trust. But the buyer is almost certainly Melissa, Lucas noted, which raises other considerations, such as why she wants this particular property so badly, what her true motives are. Victoria was silent for a moment. Lucas, I've represented you through this entire ordeal. I've seen firsthand how Melissa's actions devastated your family. If you want to reject this offer on principle, I would understand completely. It's not my money to refuse, Lucas pointed out. It belongs to Aiden and Nora. Then perhaps you should discuss it with them, Victoria suggested. They're old enough to have input on decisions affecting their future. That evening, Lucas arranged a video call with Aiden and had Nora join them in the living room. He explained the situation as neutrally as possible, presenting the financial facts without speculation about Melissa's motives. So Mom wants to buy this house she picked out with Dr. Wilcox. Nora clarified, her expression dubious. Apparently, Lucas confirmed. Using money she doesn't have. Aiden added from the screen of Lucas's laptop. Where is she getting $7 million? That's a valid question, Lucas acknowledged. One I intend to have answered before any sale proceeds. But if everything checks out, Nora persisted, would we sell? Lucas looked between his children. That's what I wanted to discuss with you both. This is your trust fund, your future. The decision should reflect your wishes. Aiden and Nora exchanged a glance through the video call. I think we should sell, Aiden said finally. Not for Mom's sake, but for ours. That much additional money in the trust would secure Nora's college education, and then some. I agree, Nora nodded. But I have one condition. What's that? Lucas asked. We never set foot in that house, Nora said firmly. I don't want any part of something Mom and Dr. Wilcox picked out together while they were stealing from us. Agreed, Aiden said immediately. Lucas nodded, proud of their mature perspective. Then I'll have Victoria proceed with the sale, contingent on verification of the fund's source. The investigation into Melissa's finances revealed an unexpected source for the purchase money, a life insurance policy on Dr. Wilcox that named Melissa as beneficiary. The policy had been established years before they met, with his first wife as the original beneficiary, but never updated through subsequent marriages. The irony wasn't lost on Lucas. Nathaniel Wilcox, who had manipulated and ultimately betrayed Melissa, was now posthumously funding her desires. After thorough legal review, the sale proceeded. The trust received the full amount, which was immediately diversified into more stable investments. The property in Aspen transferred to Melissa's ownership with no further connection to the Davenport family. Lucas never asked why the property meant so much to her. Some questions were better left unanswered. 5 years later, Lucas stood with Nora on another graduation stage, this time at Stanford University, where she had just received her degree in biomedical engineering. Aiden, now a commissioned officer in the Navy, stood